never do.
So I asked them to report so that the sidewalk guy would come do first, and then the street guy. They said they would work on it. Yeah, he told the sidewalk guy told me his schedule, and he said he actually comes after the street guy, so they're gonna switch.
Okay.
You're not locking that door tonight.
No, I put a little
Okay.
kicker in there.
It is much better. That cleaning the sidewalk is really good.
Yeah, I mean, you're not missing anything.
I
Not with that big.
I see everything going on.
But you're a sweetheart, always.
Okay, we're going to try to get started here as soon as council members take their seats. You're leaving? Good evening. Welcome to the City Council meeting for Tuesday, June 25th, 2019. And at this time, will you all please rise and join me in saluting our flag? Please say with me, I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, and there are no presentations this evening. Madam Clerk, will you please call the roll?
The record will reflect that all council members are present.
Okay, Ms. Barlow, any report?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. There was no reportable action taken in closed session.
Okay, and we have no presentations. Now is the time in the meeting for public comment. If you would like to speak on any item not on our agenda, please come to one of the two podiums. And there are also seats reserved in the first column for you. Each speaker will be limited to 3 minutes. Good evening.
Hi, good evening. My name is Liz McNabb. I'm the district coordinator for Assemblywoman Cotty Petrie-Norris, and I'm here to give a couple of updates on things that the Assemblywoman is working on up in Sacramento. First of all, I'd like to compliment you on the remodel of the City Council chambers. It looks beautiful and certainly wonderful to be refreshed and up to date, so congratulations on that. Also, we really enjoyed participating in Saturday's summer kickoff at the event lawn at Lions Park. It was a beautiful afternoon and morning, and people really love the new event space, so it's a wonderful place for the public to gather. Also, I would like to update on a couple of different events that we have coming up in the district. This Saturday, if you have kids or grandkids and you want to have your car seat safety checked, we're doing a car seat checkup at Irvine City Hall, so you could join us there, and that is from 9 until noon. And then on July 18th, we are holding an appointments workshop for state boards, committees, and commissions, and that is at Newport Beach City Hall from 6:30 till 8. Also wanted to mention that we are looking forward to joining you at the July 3rd event here across the street that the city is hosting. That looks to be a lot of fun. And lastly, I would like to say that the governor has just 2 more days to sign the budget, and so once that is complete, we will have another very extensive updated report to talk about the budget wins for the city of Costa Mesa and the county at large. So those are my updates. Thank you very much, and happy 4th of July to everyone. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker?
Like 3 minutes back. So Fairview Park, I just want to let you see that it's 210 acres of open space. This is a passive open space. It consists of bluffs, vernal pools, grasslands, trails, and endangered plants and animals. This is a unique park in Costa Mesa. There's no other park like this for many, many miles. The riparian area, even though it's man-made, it's still home to lots of birds and mammals. Unfortunately, the mosquito abatement program did kick out the red-winged blackbirds, but we still have had burrowing owls visit us now for the past couple years. The threatened California gnatcatcher is still nesting year-round. They're small. They eat a lot of insects, including mosquitoes. If given a chance to recover, they would actually save the city money instead of using OC vector and fund drying with mosquito abatement programs. Really, it's the best way to go. There's a lot of research. If you're interested in it, I can give it to you. Here's a great blue heron enjoying lunch. Rodent control for free. You know, I mean, come on. This is a wonderful thing that we should be utilizing. Big and small. This is an endangered fairy shrimp. Depend on Fairview Park for their survival. Also the migrating birds. It's the Pacific Flyway. They stop in Fairview Park. They don't go to McDonald's. They stop in Fairview Park to rest and eat. Here is prostrate navaricea. It's an endangered plant. You'll find this nowhere else around. And you know, our planet is suffering greatly now. If making local decisions, wise local decisions, it will help us globally. Also, there's a couple of Native American sites there that really need to be respected and honored. Every 3rd weekend of the month, there is a train ride free to the public. It allows the people to get close to the resources without trampling them, an important part of the Fairview Park Master Plan. It's really the gem of Costa Mesa. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, if there are no other speakers, we'll close public. Okay, come on. If anyone else wishes to speak, please come up to the podium at this time. Otherwise, this will be our last speaker.
Waiting for them to put my slides up. Do you have a clicker for me? Okay.
Thank you.
My name's Cindy Black, and
As a prior member of the Fairview Park Steering Committee, I and other committee members had the opportunity to recommend or not proposed projects in Fairview Park. One of these projects was the Storm Drain Improvement Project. We I can't say that word, you know what I mean, voted not to recommend the project or that it be placed on the ballot. My reasoning was that much of the flooding issue originates outside of the park, and that's where it should be addressed. I shared photos of the drainage for the area at Wilson Avenue and Fairview Park's southerly boundary between Pacific Avenue and Canyon Drive, along with the inadequate earthen ditch being used to accept the runoff. Leah Cabrera of Cabrera Engineering stated that it is the city's easement. Regardless of the Fairview Park Steering Committee's recommendation, the City Council voted to approve the project July 3rd, 2018, with Councilmember Foley making the motion and Councilmember Rickheimer seconding. All voted for approval, exempting the project, citing that it was a maintenance and public safety issue, which it is not. Mr. Sutherman incorrectly stated at the last council meeting that all the water flows in a southerly direction from Fairview Park. This is not the case, as you can see in the Orange County Flood District's map and the city's own hand-pencil drainage map. Water flows northerly up Pacific towards the park. The drainage system in this area is woefully inadequate even to handle small 10-year rain events, as stated by Leah Cabrera of Cabrera Engineering. There is only one small storm drain at Canyon Drive across from Majeska Circle to handle all this runoff. This is unacceptable, and the city needs to realize this and create a properly designed drainage system for this area, independent from impacting Fairview Park's resources. This pink line on here, this is where the earthen ditch is that handles all the runoff. This is the city's mapping, and I don't know if you can see on there, but there's pencil lines. The bottom is actually the north. You can see it's coming from Fairview Park and where the school is. But look over there where Pacific is. It's heading northerly. And this is the OC Flood District map showing the same thing. Top left-hand side, you see the Pacific. The arrow is going northward. And then you see that green squiggly line, that's the earthen ditch. I mean, this is like antiquated kind of, this isn't like farm and buggy days. We need to have something better than this. Thanks.
Next speaker.
So I don't know where the cameras are or who can see this, but I'd like to talk about this for a minute. I think everyone in Costa Mesa should be really concerned about this. At the Orange County Supervisors meeting this morning, thank you very much, Mayor Foley, because you stood right out there front and center, and you delivered a petition of 10,000 signatures, and I mostly saw people from Newport Beach there. I don't know where the people of Costa Mesa are, but you better start paying attention because this is coming right over your head. And I'd really, really like it if people would get on board and sign the petition. And we've been putting signs out just like it was a campaign. Put them out on Friday night, take them down on Sunday night. Please pay attention if you want a sign to put in your yard. If you want people to start paying attention, I don't know what we can do. This is going to affect our entire city. It's not just the east side of Costa Mesa. It's going to affect the entire city. And by the way, I don't think I spoke to the head of the supervisors after the meeting. No one has mentioned drugs. And in 2013, Wake Up Newport had a meeting at 7:30 in the morning, but it was the head of the DEA, Homeland Security, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And they said that the Newport Harbor, the small harbors on the coast, are the epicenter for bringing in heroin and opioids into California. Not just the big airports, because the big ports, because those go through customs. But all these little things are coming into the harbor, and guess what they're doing? If they are dispersed from Costa Mesa, but they are also put on small jet airplanes. Now they're going to use the small jet airplanes to disperse the marijuana that we're growing in our city, because they can't take the trucks across the state lines, but they can drive them right over to John Wayne Airport at 2 o'clock in the morning, put them on a plane, take them wherever they want. Pay attention.
Thank you. Okay, this is our last speaker.
Beth Rufakis, Costa Mesa resident. I have an issue with the parking situation down by the Historical Society. I know there is a problem because you have the construction, and I guess you have some other events that go on down there when the Historical Society is open. And we usually have quite a few staff working there, volunteers, on Thursday and Friday. And there's just no parking. Even the parking lot that's in front of the Historical Society is used by city vehicles and some other vehicles for people that are not members of the Historical Society. And the front parking lot, in order to walk around to get into the entrance to the Historical Society, is very dangerous because there is no sidewalk along there for people to walk on. And we have a lot of members who are, elderly, and it presents a problem. I know I take my mother over there. I have to park in the middle of the parking lot because there's no parking space at all. And I have to let her out, and then when I come to pick her up, the same situation exists. And I know someone had put up some signs, 3 signs on the wrought iron fence about it being, those 3 spaces being for the Historical Society on Thursday and Friday. But I think we need some more parking spaces available, and that's a problem. The other thing is, I've noticed around the city, I've seen some drones flying around, and I was wondering if we have a formal drone policy and what that is. If we don't, we should have one, and because there is a concern. Some of them are fairly large, and if they're not operated correctly, or they should come down, they could have serious injuries to someone. And so I have a concern with that. Also, we seem to have a lot of homeless people wandering around all the neighborhoods. I saw some woman was changing her clothes in the parking lot around on Rochester, and they resurfaced the parking lot behind El Matador, and that whole area now is a parking lot. So some of them are, kind of hanging out in the parking lot. I noticed that the other day when I was driving down. I don't think it's really good to have people changing their clothes on the
Thank you. Ms. Rufakis,
area.
how many parking spaces do you think would be needed for the Historical Society? Because I agree, I think we should have some reserved spots there.
Yeah.
Because it's mostly senior citizens working in there. So do you know, if 3 is not enough, how many do we need?
I would say probably that most of that area that's right in front of the Historical Society, and it's just usually Thursday and Friday when we're open.
Okay.
But the other area, we also have some people that are handicapped and have disabled stickers. So I think there's probably, I know there's at least one that's there every day that we're open, and there might be another one as well.
Okay, Mr. Martin,
Thank you.
do you think that you can meet with Ms.
Madam Mayor?
Rufakis and help her?
We're actually working on this issue right now.
Well, there you go.
We know there's some problems with some overnight parking. We're working on designating Historical Society parking only, so we should have this issue resolved soon.
Okay, there you go.
Thank you.
Problem solved. Okay, at this time, we will have council member committee reports, comments, and suggestions. And just as a reminder, if you don't have to all speak, but if you would like to speak, just put your name in the queue. Okay, Councilmember Marr.
Good evening, everyone. 2 quick comments. One, thank you for all of the economists and municipal finance experts who wrote in after the Daily Pilot article talked about, mentioned my use of the word bonds. So to clarify, I understand how municipal bonds work. I was speaking in the context of these very large capital projects that we keep pushing and pushing out in our CIP, in our capital improvement plan, and suggesting if the community thinks some of them are important and significant, we're probably never going to fund them out of our general fund, maybe that's an opportunity for a bond. So again, thank you for everyone who wrote to me clarifying how a bond works. Number 2, I'm doing an event on Thursday at 8:30 in the morning at the Starbucks on Fairview and Baker. It's just a community coffee, 8:30 to 9:30. Stop by and say hello. Thank you.
Okay, next up is Councilmember Guinness.
Reynolds was, oh, I see we're following this order.
Right.
Okay, Mansers.
He didn't want to speak.
Oh, I get it. Okay. Pardon.
Okay. It's okay. We don't all have to speak at every time.
Okay. I just wanted to thank everybody who came out for the airport hearings this morning. I think we're still trying to sort out the details of the motion. However, it's not over. There are going to be contracts for lessees. We'll have to monitor those. One of the important things is making sure that there are conditions put into the leases that will protect the neighborhoods to the extent that that's feasible. And so this is just like the first step in a long haul. And so I'm going to encourage more Costa Mesa residents to get involved in that. And then the flip side of the airports, I have noticed a lot of drones myself, just say walking around. Some of them are pretty small, they're pretty quiet, they seem pretty innocuous. But some of them are pretty noisy and obnoxious. And we do have an item later on the Harbor Soaring Society. But beyond that, this is a potentially hazardous activity for our neighborhoods, as well as an invasion of privacy for people. And many cities have adopted regulations pertaining to drones. Above 400 feet, that's FAA. Below 400 feet, FAA doesn't get involved, and so it's really up to us. And so that's something that I believe we probably need to look at, and I'll probably have more to talk about regarding that particular topic when we get to the HSS, because it seems to me like it's sort of a ball of wax. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Reynolds.
Right, thank you. So first I just wanted to say thanks again to all of our staff and members of the public. Before each of these meetings, I go through kind of the previous week of work, and I'm just always so impressed about how much is happening in the city, across our entire staff and to the public who are sending us a lot of information that's very helpful. So thank you all. One thing I did do in the past week was go on a ride along with our park rangers. I specifically wanted to look at what we were doing in Talbot Park and Fairview Park to kind of keep the parks clear of encampments, and was really impressed with the work our rangers are doing and the coordination with the county. We can always use extra help, all of the extra eyes we have from the public who are using those parks. The rangers did say it's very helpful to get calls. So if you see piles of clothing or something that looks like an encampment, or if you see someone who looks like they may be living in the park, please do call our non-emergency hotline. That's the 714-754-5252 number. That's very helpful for them. And a few updates from the committees that I thought would be helpful for the public and council as well. So the Fairview Park Steering Committee, really excited about some of the plans for this year with that group. We've got a good work plan in place to get to the recommendations that group has plans to bring to council. They've created 4 subcommittees, one each to focus on communications, partnerships and public use, land management, and grants and funding opportunities. So really like that plan, and I think that committee is going to be doing a lot of good work. The Bikeway and Walkability Committee has done a lot of really good work in the past getting the active transportation plan approved. This year they're really picking up efforts on walkability, so improving infrastructure and the safety of pedestrians in our city. There's a group that's working on developing walk audits to identify specific improvements around the city to improve walkability. And I believe we're making good progress on getting a grant, or have secured a grant, to begin a pedestrian master plan, which will be great for the city. Earlier today, I attended the Shelter Advisory Committee. So this is a group of folks working specifically on issues around our shelter. They are working on an outreach plan, an improved outreach plan to get better communication out to both the residential and the business community So that's very good work happening. And they did say that despite a lot of volunteer signups early on, they've had really low retention on volunteers. So especially as we're in the summer months, if there are students who are looking to volunteer, that's something that would be really helpful. Volunteering to help with meal service, or volunteering even just to be sort of a friend to some of the residents that are there participating in building puzzles or movie nights. You can find information about volunteering on the city website. That is it for me. I wanted to ask the city manager in her report to make sure we get an update on fireworks mitigation. We're heading into that season already. I think we're already hearing it. And then as well, mitigation for the parking impacts during the Orange County Fair. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, Councilmember Chavez.
Hello, everyone. As always, thank you for coming to our meeting. Quick updates this week. Yesterday, alongside Councilman Reynolds, we held a meet and greet at Neat Coffee, a brand new relocated coffee shop in Westside Costa Mesa, right next to the Senior Center. A really nice place to walk to and bike to if you're interested in getting some nice coffee. Great to hear from residents as well. And one thing I want to ask staff is there was a concern mentioned on the alleyways behind El Metate. It looks like a few residents feel like they're getting a bit more run down. If you guys check on those, make sure they're up to par, it'd be perfect. But my main plug this week is for the library. We're now officially in summer months. All our local NMSU students are now out of school, and it's a great way to keep them engaged learning by going to the library and seeing the activities we have for them. It's a great use of community space, and I hope everyone that has children can check it out at least once this summer. And that's all for today. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Stevens. Mayor Pro Tem Stevens.
Thank you. So these days, I'm fairly obsessed with promoting the 3rd of July event. So I can't stop this opportunity from doing so. So I want you to see this flyer, and I think there should be a flyer posted, but this flyer that we're handing out has all the sponsors. Please read those sponsors, because without those sponsors, we would not be having an event. So let me hit some highlights of this event. And then I have one other thing I want to do. It's a free event to the public, free admission, free parking. We're going to have a fireworks display. It's actually called a pyrotechnics display. We've got 2 bands that are playing. Moxie Ann is going to play as the opening act, and then it's the Tijuana Dogs, who's a great cover band. We have a dunk tank provided by John Kelly. So all the council members are going to sign up to go to the dunk tank. We have a rib eating contest, thanks to Newport Rib Company. A burrito eating contest, thanks to Miguel's Jr. Heads or tails game. Frisbees, glow-in-the-dark Frisbees are going to be given out, thanks to One Metro West, Rose Equities. Glow sticks, many community groups, including the Lions Club, is going to be there. And the Costa Mesa Firefighters Association are giving out hot dogs, 1,000 hot dogs. So thank you to them. And just recently, we learned that PETA has offered to donate 200 vegan hot dogs. So I might even do a vegan hot dog eating contest for those gluttonous vegans out there in our community. And finally, and last but not least, our own Harley Ruda is going to read a passage from the Declaration of Independence. So we remember what this event is. It's not just hot dogs and Tijuana dogs. It's to commemorate and to celebrate the principles that underlie our entire country. It's a very important holiday and a very important event for our community. Now, can you stop my time for a second?
I don't have control of time.
You don't have to talk.
Yes.
So that's the 3rd of July event. That's all I have to say for now about that. But I'd like to call up Chief Stefano, because he did a recent trip with some firefighters and some friends of the department to New York City, and I'd like him to talk to the community and the council about that trip.
Sure. Well, thanks, Mayor Pro Tem, members of the council. Yeah, I had the honor this past weekend, representatives from the Fire and Rescue Department, the Firefighters Association, and 50 friends and family of Shanna Kriza. We flew over and had a very special ceremony in the heart of Brooklyn, Firehouse 222, to honor the memory of Mike Kriza, Ironman Mike. And the whole process ceremony came up with discussions he had with his wife, some years ago about the love he had for FDNY, and that he wanted to, when he died, that he wanted to ride on one of the busiest trucks in the nation in the years after his passing. And so we did say we were going to do everything we could to make that happen. Friends of theirs, Mark Anaya, who's an FDNY firefighter, and his wife are close friends with the Creases, and so we were able to coordinate that. And this past weekend, this group of 50 went out to the firehouse, had a very special ceremony, presentation. There was a presentation from the Siller Foundation, which is one of the 9/11 foundations, made a presentation to the family. But just, it's the fire family at its finest, the West Coast meeting the East Coast. And it finished with Mark Anaya, who's a firefighter. We presented him with a very nice plaque that will be mounted in the firehouse forever now. And so if anyone's in New York, they can go to Brooklyn. But also some of his ashes will be with firefighter Mark Anaya in his helmet. So every call that he goes on, whether he's on truck 111, engine 222, or throughout New York, Captain Mike Creasy will be right along with him. So special ceremony. I appreciate you letting me share that. And it certainly meant a lot to the family. And it's one of those final pieces to help show strength to the family. But it was special for us and everyone to be a part of it. So thanks for letting me share that.
Thank you.
Great. Okay, sorry. Okay, who's next? Oh, no, I'm last. Okay, I'm up. So very good. Thank you for that. That's beautiful. Thank you. Couple things. This Saturday, I attended along with Mayor Pro Tem Stevens, the Someone Cares Soup Kitchen annual gala, and it was held at the Harper, which is our new event venue in Costa Mesa on Alms Way. It's a beautiful space, and I encourage anyone who hasn't had an opportunity to check it out. If you have any events coming up, wedding receptions, anniversary receptions, birthday parties, private dinner for your company, it's a really great space to attend and to use. And I wanted to thank Doreen and Matt, who are in our neighborhood improvement division, there was a woman who shared her story, and she shared her story how she was living in what people refer to as the jungle, which is Talbot Park, and how Doreen and Matt were just always out there talking to her, our city staff, encouraging her to move out of that space. And now she has a job, and she is housed. She has an apartment and a car, and she shared her story of success, which was really in large part because of our amazing staff in our neighborhood improvement division. So let's clap for them. And along those lines, I would like to ask that again, I know I asked this last time, but we've got to get that phone number out that relates to the shelter and who to call. I know we can call the police assistance non-emergency line, which is 714-754-5252. But there's a little rumor being spread around that our police department isn't doing enforcement of the anti-camping anymore, and I know that's not true. I know that the chief is nodding his head, and that we have a lot of really good officers that are working really hard in that area. So we want to squelch out that rumor right away. Finally, I would like to just give a brief update about the meeting this morning. There was a Board of Supervisors meeting regarding the airport and the plans for expansion. The Board of Supervisors voted 5-0, and they voted to, even though it wasn't as big of an expansion as what was on the table in May, it certainly was a good compromise. It's still a little bit of an expansion, but they will have 2 fixed-based operation areas, and then full service, and then 2 that are limited service. And then the international terminal will be limited to the hours of 5 a.m. to midnight. And then they are going out for a request for proposal for these fixed-based operators to be able to possibly dictate how we can put some kind of a curfew on the flights for, not the commercial flights, because those are already subject to a curfew through the settlement agreement, but for these, what we call general aviation, corporate jets. And so we're going to have more information for you about that, but it's very important that we stay engaged, and we will continue to, as a council, stay engaged to make sure that those conditions, if they are to be implemented, are part of the request for proposal and any lease agreements. So stay tuned for more information about that. Thanks to everybody who signed the petition. We did present more than 10,000 signatures to the Board of Supervisors, and so there's a lot of interest in this in our community. Thank you. Okay, at this time, we will have the report from the City Manager's Office. Ms. Letourneau?
Yes, I have a few updates for you. We have received a few concerns in anticipation of the fair starting regarding parking. So I want to encourage everybody, if you have concerns regarding parking, you see something, please contact the police department. They will be doing enhanced enforcement, but please report it as soon as possible. If anybody has any concerns regarding permits or things like that, please contact the Transportation Division of the Public Services Department at 714-754-4825. And I'd like to remind everybody that City Hall will be closed on July 4th and July 5th. And I'd like to ask Chief Sharpnick and Chief Stefano to come up and talk about all that we're doing to prepare for the July 4th holiday.
Thank you.
Thank you, Tammy. Madam Mayor, members of the council, Chief Sharpnick and I will just give you a quick tag team of what we've been doing kind of for the roll-up that we've done every year. But it's the zero tolerance philosophy that's still in place, tempered with be a good neighbor. So we certainly hear the fireworks that are out there and that are happening, but we are certainly encouraging the community to make contact and to help with that process. It can't be done with just us. The public relations campaign has been rolled out, and so you'll start to see things today. You probably saw coming in some of the signage that's up related to the enforcement, which Chief Sharpnick will speak to in a minute. The social media campaign is coming out as well, bilingual, so we'll do everything we can as far as that goes. We have the fireworks stands that you have seen out. We were here last week meeting with all the operators of those stands and walked through that process. We have about 36 stands, I believe, that are throughout the town. The drops for fireworks will take place this weekend. Sales start on the 30th. We do want to remind everyone that Costa Mesa is extremely generous with the legal fireworks, which can be lit off on the 2nd, 3rd, and 4th. We ask that people abide by that. And again, that goes back to being a good neighbor. Enforcement will be strong. The contact number, if you do hear fireworks and you're not able to make contact with your neighbors out there or within the community, and that's going to be really the strongest piece for us, is the 714-754-5252 contact number. And that's very important. Additionally, we have resources that are going out as we get closer to the events. We'll have the fire explorers, our CERT team, the police explorers working together, focusing on some of the hot spots in town. We'll be handing out over 7,000 door hangers throughout the city. Again, just emphasizing we want everyone to enjoy the 4th of July with a safe and sane. The illegal fireworks are really the fireworks that are problematic, and we're going to continue to send that message. We want everyone to have a great 4th of July, but again, we're going to hear fireworks, but we're going to mitigate the problem together, and that's really the biggest message, being a good neighbor. And with that, I'll turn it over to Chief Sharpnick speaking to some of the enforcement.
Thank you. Good evening, Madam Mayor, members of the council. As Chief Stefano said, we are going to apply a zero tolerance approach this year. And so what that means is any illegal fireworks that we come across, we're going to conduct the strictest enforcement possible. We do want members of the community to enjoy the 4th of July, and we're going to do everything we can to help facilitate that by not only enforcing the violations, but being out in the public. And we'll do that in a couple forms. For example, we're going to have marked units, additional patrols on the 2nd, 3rd, and 4th. So we'll supplement our normal staffing by 1 sergeant, 8 officers each night, in addition to park rangers. And then culminating on the 4th of July, we're going to have 3 sergeants, 22 officers, and 2 park rangers to handle that load of calls for service. We began our approach for 4th of July fireworks in June, conducting several undercover operations up to tonight. And thus far, we've seized upwards of 2,000 pounds of illegal fireworks. These operations are continuing. As we get closer, probably by the end of the week, we'll put out a piece, social media, to help serve as a deterrent, warning those that want to possess and use illegal fireworks in the city that they will receive strict prosecution. In addition to that, today we deployed 6 LED signboards throughout the city outlining that illegal fireworks are going to be targeted. For normal fireworks, they're illegal. Anything that's modified, safe and sane, and any others, for example, throwing fireworks, these are misdemeanor violations, punishable by a fine up to $1,000. Fireworks that we deemed as destructive devices, some such as M80s, dynamite, things of that nature. Those are felonies, and we will arrest and book individuals, not only in possession, but individuals lighting those fireworks. At the end, we've already said it a number of times, but anybody in the community that observes these violations, observes folks in possession of illegal fireworks, I encourage you to call our non-emergency line at 714-754-5252.
Thank you, Chief. Can I ask a question? So the fireworks that we see that are up in the air that look like the show fireworks that are not approved, are those a felony or a misdemeanor?
Those are felony, well, it depends. For example, some go up in the air and they're considered mortars. Okay. Those are felonies. It just depends what they have. For example, if they take a Piccolo Pete's, those are an easy example, and they modify it and it actually goes up into the air, that would be a misdemeanor violation of our section. And those misdemeanor violations, officers have to witness for us to enforce. So again, we encourage the calls for service by the community.
Okay, thank you so much. Thanks for the update. Did you have a question for them? Oh, okay.
Chief.
Sorry, they already sat down. Can you come back up?
Chief
Mayor Pro
Stefano.
Tem Stevens had a question for Chief Stefano.
Yeah, I have a quick question for Chief Stefano. Last year, wasn't there a structure fire associated with illegal fireworks?
Yes.
Can you tell us about that?
We had a couple, and again, it's making a determination is what we try to do, and it's not always exactly clear, but one structure fire that we did have was an aerial firework that exploded on a roof and caught it on fire. For the most part, the fires that we have take place in the later hours, and a lot of times it's even with the safe and sane, people throw away the fireworks. But last year we did have a structure fire. We were able to stop it, so it didn't move on. But
thank you.
You got it.
Ms. Letourneau, did you have any other report?
No.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Barlow, any report from the City Attorney's Office?
No, not this evening. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. All right, we'll have the consent calendar at this time. All matters listed under the consent calendar are considered to be routine and will be acted upon in one motion. There will be no separate discussion of these items unless members of the City Council staff or the public request specific items to be discussed and are removed from the consent calendar for discussion. Council, if you have any items that you wish to be pulled, please put your name in the queue. Member Guinness?
5.
Okay. Madam Clerk, were there any other items requested to be pulled?
Yes, the public also requests item number 3, the warrants.
Okay. Council, it appears, bless you, our motion is working now.
Yes.
So we have a motion by Stevens, second by Reynolds to approve the balance of the consent calendar. Please cast your vote.
Motion carries 7-0.
Okay. Yay, it worked, our first official motion. Okay. We get excited over.
Here, I want to take a picture. Hold on.
So,
got it.
item number 3.
Is the warrant resolution pulled by the public?
Okay.
So let's see.
Ms. Parker?
Is it on? Page 4. Okay, so this is a Anaheim Regional Medical Center bill on the warrant. But why I'm bringing this up tonight is I know it annoys people that I keep emphasizing all the money that we spend on sober living in this city, but I'm sorry, if you add it all up, it is our biggest expenditure. It really is. It ends up being almost $1 million a year, if not more. So with all the discussion of our budget, I just wish people would keep that in mind, how it all happened. We've laid out the red carpet for them. The present council is fighting back. I think it's really important. But what made me come up tonight is, you know, the airport thing. So on the front page of the LA Times this morning, so the city of Los Angeles is suing the FAA because they just spread out the flight paths without notification, and, you know, kind of like what Orange County did to us. But the reason I'm bringing this up is I would like the city to be proactive legally, even if it is expensive, because if we don't get involved in things with these other cities and fight things, which we could have done with sober living, look at the money we're spending on Narcan. Ask the fire and the police department. The ambulance supplies, if you go through this warrant every 2 weeks, we're spending a fortune on sober living. So please keep fighting. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, council, we'll close public comment. Council, is there a motion? Motion by Reynolds, seconded by Marr. Call for the question. I voted.
Motion carries 7-0.
Okay, thank you. Okay, item number 5.
Councilmember Guinness.
Can you please read it?
This is the Traffic Management Services Agreement with the 32nd District Agricultural Association. And we have a member of the public that'd like to speak on this also.
Okay, and could we get a brief staff report about this? Is there somebody who is able to give a quick? All right, good, they're here anyway. And while you're walking up, great job escorting the graduates into the stadium this weekend, or this last week. That was wonderful.
Good evening, Madam Mayor and members of the City Council. Sergeant Zach Alfritz with the Costa Mesa Police Department Special Events. The item that's up for tonight is the annual contract for the Orange County Fair, which runs every year. And basically, the contract would be for us to provide services for traffic control. Also to handle any kind of parking complaints that occur in the neighborhoods for people that are parking, that are going to the fair and not parking in the designated areas, for us to handle those. In addition, there is an additional request for the annual year-round contract. Anytime that the traffic is impacted throughout the city for the residents, we have designated a contract with the Orange County Fair that we will, sometimes without notification, have to work those events, such as the Pet Expo. The night market has become very, very popular and has caused significant impacts to the community, so we've been working that. So those are the two contracts that we're asking the council to review and approve. The cost that the Orange County Fair is asked to, or to provide, is basically a full cost recovery for the officers' benefits and additional, so that there's no cost to the city or the residents.
Okay, great. If you had a question on this item from the council, please put your name in the queue. Councilmember Guinness, you pulled this item, so if you could put your name in. There we go.
Okay, I'm up?
Yes.
Okay, well, I pulled this because I had gotten complaints last year from some of the residents, and I'm starting to hear already now that people are concerned that we're devoting a lot of our resources to the traffic control immediately surrounding the fairgrounds, and then the neighborhoods get shorted, particularly in the area of just the overflow parking. And residents really felt they needed a little more help on the overflow parking issue regarding disturbances in College Park in particular.
Well, we do have volunteer positions open, so those people that are adamant about they can come and join. I did pull some stats regarding complaints. For example, last year in the month of June, as far as the special permit parking sites, we issued 275 citations that month. In September, 133. So that's 1 month before, 1 month after the Orange County Fair. In July, it almost doubled. We issued 481 citations for special permit parking. So we do respond. We are proactive, and we do take action and respond to the residential complaints. We know that that happens. And so every year we do deploy and staff accordingly to address that, because we know it's a big quality of life thing. In the month of August, we issued the 275. So, and you have to remember, there's only 2 weeks in July and 2 weeks in August that the fair impacts that. So that's a significant increase, almost double in July. So we do respond to that, and we do address it.
Okay, the feeling was particularly towards the end of the fair, it was like people just gave up. That they felt like even maybe the department had given up on enforcement too.
We're all about enforcement.
Okay.
Yeah, we're here for the community. So we write a lot of citations because if we don't, then that particular person, and it's usually the same areas that are affected, we'll have to go out and just continually speak to them. So we end up knowing them kind of on a first name basis every year, and we address that accordingly. So we work with them.
Thank you.
Okay, Councilmember Reynolds.
Yeah, just a quick question. You mentioned volunteers. What can volunteers do to help in this?
We have a volunteer program at the police department, and we used to, we had two that actually came out, and we would actually assign them for parking control. We are down two, so we do have a unit that's being used by traffic aides, but we are always actively looking for, and it's usually the residents that are real concerned. We have one gentleman that's on the parking lot all the time and tells me about a particular car every day, whether it's moved. I mean, he's really good. It's good information. And so people like that are really passionate about it, we encourage them to come out and work with us, and we have things for them to do, and they can make an impact.
If someone wants to volunteer specifically for this issue, how do they sign up?
Yeah, they just go on the website and go under the, for the Citizens Academy, Crime Prevention, and they can sign up there. You're welcome.
Thank you. We're going to open this item up to public comment.
Jack Lucas, 264 Hanover Drive, College Park. I'll dispute that last testimony because on Hanover Drive, you guys are missing it, especially at the end. Our street is lined, especially at the end, and the fair patrons know it. They know they're not going to get a ticket, and the street is lined. I walk the street at 10 o'clock. We call it in. It's a standing joke. Nobody shows. And I walk the street looking for citations, especially the last 2 weekends. You're doing a good job at other times, but nobody shows. We call it in, it just goes to recording, and nobody comes. So anyways, the other big problem we have in College Park, especially along Hanover Drive, is that the OCC parking lots. The fair has just taken over those lots as their parking lots now. And in those lots, the patrons come out there till 1 in the morning. The people that lag out at the end are the rowdy ones. They're basically pretty drunk by the time they come out, and it keeps us up until 1 and 2 in the morning. The parking lot lights are motion activated, and we go through everything to people pulling wheelies, car horn duels, people fighting, and we need enforcement out there. And that should be part of these contracts now. We need patrols out there. We can't stop it. We get kept up all night, and that should be part of these contracts now. We need Costa Mesa Police. OCC doesn't do anything about it. They just hide. They don't come out. So it's one thing when the fair was 2 weeks, and now it's 5 weekends, and we suffer through it. Those lots really shouldn't be used. The fair is taking over now, and it's becoming a commercial lot. We have a zoning problem now. It's no longer educational use. This is becoming a fair commercial lot for monetary gain for the college. And this is something, this maybe isn't the time, but I'm going to approach each and every council member on this. Ms. Marr doesn't think it's a jurisdictional issue. I think it is. Once the noise emulates out and noise, light, everything else that's affecting residents and our property values. It's an issue now, and we need to address it. This government needs to address it. Thank you.
Next speaker. Oh, sorry.
It's okay. Good evening, Jay Humphrey, Costa Mesa resident. I've been involved in a number of conversations with a number of people about the parking issues from the fair. And one of the things I note in this contract is that you're looking at about a 10% for all the rest of the year fee for the police department to recover its cost. And nothing is talked about that I've seen that has to do with the increasing activity to make the fair grounds be an active venue every night of the year. And that's just simply because they want to get more commercial, they want to make more money, they want to do all those things. And in fact, if you look at their last master plan, they wanted to actually generate what would be a convention center. Wouldn't necessarily be called that, but it would be generally that kind of a venue, and people would come and go and leave at all hours of the night. Because of parking issues, they would park in the neighborhood, not during the fair, but they'd also park in places like the Merrimack parking lot for OCC, because OCC being another state facility, is kind of in a joint use contract idea. So right now, you're going to have our police doing tasks in the future that are not necessarily to be compensated for, because they've got this 75 grand for all other things that happen beside the fair. And that is, by the way, 46 weeks out of the year, not just that part for the fair. And they're probably undercompensated, in my estimation, but they make that decision. It's just a matter of what's going to happen in the future. And please, our people, our community deserves to make sure we do not get visited by those things. Remembering that people leave late at night, leave most of the time, not most of the time, leave a lot of the time inebriated. And because they're inebriated, they make stupid choices. And they make stupid loud choices. And that affects the neighborhoods. And I've only asked the fair and the fair board to be good neighbors. And they've done some things to try to help that. But one of the nice things they did, they have a group to go out and control parking outside in the neighborhoods, pick up trash, stuff like that. At the same time, they tell people where to park in the neighborhood that's not prohibited, i.e. in front of schools. So please keep in mind what's going on. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. Next speaker.
Yes, Mark Ingram, and I'm over in College Park on Hanover Drive as well. So it seems to me we're looking at $750,000, $750,000 to budget during the fair. Nobody mentioned the actual figure, but I agree with the other speakers here that we need to enforce it. And it seems like a budget issue that's allocated over the entire period, where we have signs that go up, no parking, and it's plastered in the beginning and it looks really good. But by week 3 or 4, the signs have fallen over. Signs have fallen, they're gone. So I think, as Councilmember Gina stated, that the problem arises later on in the fair, most likely because of the signage is not adequate near the end. So I'm proposing that you would budget it accordingly throughout the entire period. Also, if you're going to budget time and police enforcement at Orange Coast College at between 11 and 2 a.m., that's when we have enforcement leaving the fair, but then they go out and they do their partying. It's like a tailgate party out there at midnight. Why don't we make sure we budget some enforcement at that time as well? Finally, as you're ticketing, and this might be further not along the same lines, but we ticket heavily during the fair, and that's great. That's what we all signed up for, and when we move close to the fairgrounds. But if we're ticketing, it seems illogical to ticket on an empty street on an afternoon on a Thursday when, say, somebody's son comes home, forgets to put his tag up, and we're ticketing a resident on an empty street. So I think we should be ticketing during the fair times, during high traffic times, and when there's a parking issue. We shouldn't be ticketing somebody on an empty street just to give a ticket. And I would think maybe we could look at the registration. We'd have the technology to look at the registration to say, oh, this is a resident. Maybe we don't ticket them, or somebody's friend who came over. But if there's a parking issue, then that'd be great. Let's issue tickets. Thank you.
Mr. Ingram, I just want to clarify for you. So the fairgrounds and the fairgrounds are paying the city.
Yes.
That they're paying the
Yes.
city $745,000, and then they're
Yes.
paying the city $75,250 extra during the rest of the year. But your comments are appreciated in terms of the needing
As
of
far as
extra enforcement.
budgeting, we're budgeting this money. Whoever's paying for it, let's make sure we're budgeting it over the entire 5 weeks, not up front.
Yeah, it is. It's budgeted for
Yeah.
the whole time. Okay.
It's supposed to be. Okay.
Okay.
Okay, thank
thanks.
you.
We'll look into that.
Hi, I'm Lynn Conan. I also live on Hanover, and I live on the side of Hanover that backs up to Merrimack. So I live on the side that gets all the traffic from the fairground, from the college, but also from the fairgrounds during that time. I think my concern, and the reason that I came, is that during the fair in particular, there's a lot of traffic that travels down there. My yard ends up with trash because people throw it over the wall. I don't want to build a 45-foot tall wall. We know about walls. I don't want that. And so, sorry, I forgot myself. Anyway, I really think that that is something that needs to be addressed, that at least have that street patrol a little bit more, particularly later at night when people are leaving, because it's really, I mean, I guess I was rowdy when I was a kid, but it's not pleasant at 2 o'clock to have yelling, screaming, fighting, and hear beer cans and bottles being crashed against your fence. Thanks.
And congratulations on your graduate. Closed public comment. Councilmember Marr?
How did we come up with the number for the year-round estimate? The year-round cost?
For the annual, the 75,000?
Yes.
That was based on, and it's pretty high. I mean, last year we used 18,000.
Okay.
And we've become pretty aggressive with it in years past. The Orange County Fair doesn't routinely call us and say, we need your help. So what we do is we look at traffic congestion and patrol personnel or residents that call us and complain about last weekend being difficult to get home. So then we look at attendance. We have to actually call them, get attendance figures, and decide we're going to work this. So well, we're working closer with them now. We're providing them with basically our operational plans when we plan on, and our staffing needs before we work the event, and then we give them a final, a post plan, which lets them know how much money we used. So we kind of went over the 75, over what we used last year and the years past, so we're pretty confident we're not going to go over, but we're watching very closely so that we can provide services to the community when we need to. So we think we're going to be comfortable with the 75,000.
Okay. When we do this again next year, can we also get a report about how much we spent this year and what events we spent it on, for example?
Absolutely.
Okay, understanding that the night market and things like this are getting more and more popular, and
Yes.
we should probably just plan for that in advance. And then the other thing is, would it be possible to designate resources specifically to Merrimack at the end of the night? Because there is quite a bit of foot traffic that comes right out of Pacific Amphitheater and heads towards the parking lots, whether they be at OCC or on the west side of the fairgrounds.
Yeah, so what we do, obviously, that's with being the college, unless we're summoned over there, we really don't have any jurisdiction over there.
Right.
What we did last year was we asked the fair, that was the designated Uber Lyft pickup, which caused a big problem. And so what we asked the Orange County Fair to do was to move their designated Uber Lyft pickup into Gate 3 onto their property.
Right.
Because realizing that the fairgrounds is selling alcohol, it's one of the draws, and those patrons that are drinking, although they're being responsible calling Uber, they're being irresponsible with their actions and being loud and doing the things that they're doing, and they're causing us problems. We averaged probably about 13 arrests, drunk-related arrests, that were problems from the fair that came into our city that we
Per
had to-
night?
No, during the entire fair.
Okay.
But I mean, that's 13 too many. And we have to deal with that. So that's kind of why the costs go up a little bit for the fair. We can't put non-sworn personnel at all the manned intersections because it's a safety hazard. Number one, they're not going to protect the public. If the family's walking out and they're waiting with that drunk person who's causing issues, they're not going to be able to provide that protection. So the Orange County Fair asked us last year, what are you going to do to provide us safety for the people that come and visit our fair? Well, to provide safety, we're going to need to put sworn personnel there. And so it was effective for us. But that intersection, we don't leave until pretty much we get 75, 80% of the vehicles out of that area of Merrimack and Fairview. And, but we did ask, and they did move, but it was mid-fair, so people were still crossing thinking that that was the designated pickup. So hopefully this year, and we have a meeting tomorrow with the fair, hopefully this year, if we start off with that pickup inside the fair, that will curb some of the problems there.
Okay, and then in terms of signage, are we able to refresh the signage every week, for example?
Let me tell you about signage.
Yep.
Signs are great in the beginning, but every homeowner that doesn't have a sign on their street steals it, and they take it to their street. And so we'll find signs that, for example, Hanover has a sign, but we'll find it on a different street that didn't have one because they feel that they need one. So every day before the fair starts, we routinely go out and we look for the signs. If they're not there, we'll try to find them because they'll usually be in the same place that they were taken. If not, City Yard has a surplus of signs. We report that to them, and they immediately come out and we place signs in the streets because we want to minimize people being confused, people not knowing that it's restricted parking and getting cites because then they appeal those and then I have to deal with those. So it's nice that we're able, when we do write the tickets, that we're able to take a picture of the sign that's posted along with the citation that's issued. So every day we look for the signs and we replace them, and we know that every year they're going to be taken to a different street that's more important, but we have resources to deal with that.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Councilmember Mansour.
Thank you. Sergeant, I would like to respectfully ask if you could touch base with some of the members of the residents that spoke on Hanover. I don't know if it's a communication issue. It sounded like they called a certain number, got a recording, whatever. Just maybe if we can make sure they have the right contact information, who to stay in touch with, especially towards the end of the fair, and if we could just be notified if there's any changes or problems after the fair and what the result was and all that.
Yes, sir. I took a note of that, and I just wanted to, number one, apologize if that's what you're experiencing, but do not call the hotline. The hotline will be reviewed the next day. So if it's something that you want to have addressed, call that non-emergency number, and if you have it, if not, I'll get with you on it. It's the 754-5252 number.
Why don't we have
or if you can touch
why don't
base,
we have you two talk after the meeting?
That's all I'm asking for.
Yes.
Thank you,
Yes,
Sergeant. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Okay, Mayor Pro Tem Stevens.
So is there, you mentioned a hotline. Does the hotline go to the Costa Mesa Police Department, or does it go to the fairgrounds?
So the hotline is basically for vehicles that don't need immediate attention. If you have a vehicle that's blocking your driveway and you can't get out, you need to call the non-emergency number. That'll generate an immediate response. If you have a car that looks like it's been abandoned, maybe you're afraid that someone's living out of it or it's stolen, then you can call the hotline. And our traffic aides, every morning, the first one that comes in, we have traffic aides that come in as early as 6, and normally at 7 a.m. They go through that hotline and they take off all the complaints on the hotline. And then the first thing they do is they go check all those complaints. So if you need an immediate response, you have to call the non-emergency to generate that immediate call.
Some of these things that the folks on Hanover were talking about, people being loud, throwing stuff over their back wall, things of that nature. Are those items reported to the fair? Is there something that the fair can do about that to mitigate that?
Well,
or are they all kind of, heaped onto the enforcement of the Costa Mesa Police Department?
Yeah, usually anything that that's reported to the Orange County Sheriff's Department at that time, they're more than happy to report that to us and say, go handle it, it's in your city street. So we do get some calls. However, if there is glass breaking, we would expect the community to call us right away because we don't know if it's someone breaking into a car or if it's a bottle. So I would hope that if there's any noise like that, we get a call to, even an emergency call, that would be fine as well. As far as trash, the Orange County Fair because of our City Hall parking lots, they do contract with a company that they can place trash cans, trash receptacles in certain areas, and every night they have that company that goes around in their truck and they empty those trash cans because they overflow every night. So what I plan on doing in the meeting tomorrow is seeing if they can place some receptacles in that area, and then go ahead and police those every night so that they're emptied. And then I encourage any kind of noises of glass breaking to go right to the emergency line or non-emergency line so that we can respond to those.
I'm not sure, and maybe this is being done, but maybe in your meeting tomorrow, consider having some type of a communication with the folks in College Park or other people that border, and have it be like a list of, you call this number when, you call this number when, if it's trash, you call this number. And so then they can have that, and whatever they're experiencing, they know precisely what number to call and what to expect when they call that number.
Yes, we can do that.
Okay. Councilmember Gittes, you have another question?
Yeah, regarding the Merrimack lot, I realize that there are a lot of jurisdictional issues here, and maybe this is something for the city attorney as well. But Orange Coast College is obviously not doing any kind of patrolling there at night, it's particularly when they don't have classes going on and stuff. So nobody's doing it. And that means that our poor residents are pretty much left to the mercy of the good wishes of the people who are wanting to get rowdy in the Merrimack lot. So is there something we could negotiate with Orange Coast College potentially to allow us to respond to, not to be patrolling it, but to at least respond to disturbances that are reported there? I don't know what the jurisdictional issues are. I mean, I know there are a lot of them, but it seems like this can't be insurmountable.
Well, on an annually, and I've been doing this 30 years, annually we have personnel there on the corners on both sides of the street, the east and west side. If we hear fights, we will respond. We don't call OCC. We do respond to escalation of voices, any kind of fight. We deploy resources there immediately. If anyone's throwing bottles, we will respond immediately. So what I meant was we don't routinely, that's not part of our operational plan, is to patrol check the lots. But if there's any kind of situation that requires immediate assistance, we do routinely deploy resources there. If not, if the public does call in, we will respond immediately over there. So we generally don't have any problem. Noise is the noise of the fair. I know the residents are kind of compensated with tickets, but it's just the fair. We do the best we can, and I myself have visited the Del Mar Fair recently, and I think we do a pretty good job with responding to residents' complaints and trying to keep them safe.
Well, it sounds like it's basically the rowdy drunk noises, not just your general hum and whatnot. For example, I don't live anywhere near the fairgrounds, but one night somebody around the corner had a party, and some of them were getting rowdy in the street afterwards. I think by the time I called, there were already probably 4 or 5 people who had already called, because you could tell dispatch knew exactly where it was and what was going on. And it was just rowdy drunks. But there was a good, timely response. So it would seem like if we could get that in an otherwise quiet neighborhood, that the people who are living on Hanover should be able to get that too.
Yeah, and I'll talk to Orange Coast College security, and I'll ask them to see if they can maybe increase staffing, at least on the weekends during the fair, and be more visible, because when these people are drunk, they're not going to be able to determine if it's OCC or the Costa Mesa police. So anything we can do as a visual deterrent would be better. So I'll speak to them about that as well.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. I had just had 2 questions. Last year, we had an issue with Waze and the app, and it was directing traffic into our neighborhoods as a way to get around the traffic. And so, for example, I pulled into my own neighborhood, Mesa Del Mar, and I could not go down Drake Street because the traffic just winded all around the neighborhood, all the way down Drake to St. Clair. So that's very unusual during fair time.
Right.
And it was because Waze, the app, was directing everyone into that spot. And what happened was the cars were lined up both sides, so people could not even get out of their driveways. So I had mentioned this to the fair last year, and they were supposed to contact, I suppose there's a way you can reach out to Waze, WAZE, and you can ask them not to direct traffic into certain neighborhoods. So could we make sure that College Park and Mesa Del Mar are not on the Waze route when there's traffic on Fairview or on Newport Boulevard? Because that actually caused a lot more traffic, frankly.
Officer Torres is on it as we
Okay,
speak.
thank you, Officer Torres.
He will handle it.
Okay, and then also, if there's a new president at Orange Coast College, and so maybe it would be good, and I think Mr. Locke is here somewhere. Where is he? There he is. If we could arrange a meeting with the new president of Orange Coast College, and we could kind of talk about some of these issues, include Councilmember Marr, because it's her district. I think that would be really helpful, because, yeah, I think it is a matter of just having some people out there that are visible, and then a lot of that rowdiness will go away.
Yeah, that and that Uber drop-off pickup, moving that, I think.
Yeah, that'll help too.
Yeah, I think that'll help.
The other thing I was surprised by Ms. Conan's comment about, because on that side of Hanover, which backs to Merrimack, there isn't even a sidewalk there. And so that is not even a place where anyone should be walking.
No.
So, yeah, so you might want to, I don't know what we do about that, but that seems odd.
Yeah, and if we see that, we direct them across. So I don't routinely see that happening. Maybe before they round the corner, they're tossing bottles
Maybe.
or doing something. But bottles, we respond to bottles right away.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, well, thank you so much for all your hard work on this.
You're welcome.
Appreciate it. Council, I sort of made a mistake with our system here. Can someone make a motion, please? Because we went to the queue instead of the motions. Okay, motion by Stevens. Someone second, please.
To approve the item?
Second by Marr.
Madam Mayor.
Okay, and
Madam Mayor.
yes, you have to actually ask for your mic to be turned on. So you hit the queue. Oh, it's on. Okay.
Did Mayor
He
Pro
made
Tem-
the motion. Did you want to speak?
I wanted to speak, but I didn't know if he wanted to speak to it first. Okay. It's okay. You should speak. Thanks. Oh, it looks like the gentleman from College Park just left, but I had met with him. Unfortunately, it wasn't enough time to make anything happen with OCC before the fair actually happened. And given that they had a new incoming president, I think there's actually a couple of things we can do with the Merrimack parking lot potentially, including maybe a setback from Merrimack so that they're not parking right up against the street, in addition to security and a couple of other things. So I look forward to working on that with OCC when we have a little bit more time before the fair to actually make that happen. And then also as somebody who lives on Fair and Fairview and feels the impacts of the fair quite regularly, I do appreciate all the work that traffic control does. There's definitely days when you can tell it's better than others because we have a presence out there. So that was it. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, Mayor Pro Tem, you're going to have to ask for the mic. Oh, I thought you wanted to speak. Okay, call for the question. Please vote. I did vote, but it's not accepting my vote. Okay.
Motion carries 7-0.
All right, thank you. So we're going to take a 5-minute recess before we go on to our first new business item. And yeah. Okay, we're going to get started. Can everybody please take their seats? Okay, can you all please take your seats? Okay, Madam Clerk, we're going to get started. We have no public hearing items and no old business items. We have one new business item.
Thank you.
City Clerk, please read the title.
Approval of the use agreement with the Harbor Soaring Society for the use of a portion of Fairview Park. Presentation by Ms. D'Agosta, Fairview Park Administrator.
Thank you. And then council, just as a reminder, Ms. D'Agosto is going to give her complete report, and then if you have questions regarding it, just ask to speak, and your name will get in the queue.
Good evening, Madam Mayor and Council. We are here this evening to present the approval for the use agreement with the Harbor Soaring Society for use of the portion of Fairview Park. What we have before you for consideration this evening is two items. One is to approve a new updated use agreement with the Harbor Soaring Society. You mind if I call them HSS from here on? Okay. And for a period of 1 year, starting July 1, next month, 2019, through June 30th of 2020. And secondly, to provide staff direction on whether or not to conduct a comprehensive evaluation of the value of the partnership between HSS and the city, and to assess the compatibility of all flying activity with the master plan and Measure AA as recommended by the Fairview Park Steering Committee and the Parks, Arts, and Community Services Committee before you. So I would like to start with a little bit of background. And we all, I think, are aware that Fairview Park, or the area of Fairview Park, has been used for a very long time by flyers. But officially, I'll go through a timeline here that's in front of you. In 2005, the fly field strip, which we'll be talking about tonight, was created for safe landing and takeoffs at 150 feet by 450 feet. That's kind of the official start of this, or takeoff of this, if you will. Then in 2006 was the first agreement between the city and HSS, and that was for 1 year use agreement. In 2007, we entered a 3-year use agreement, along with creating an ordinance, rules, and permits adopted by both the Parks, Arts, and Community Services Commission and City Council at that time. And then in 2011, we did another 3-year agreement. Oh, I'm sorry, another 3-year agreement. In 2014, we signed a 5-year term, and that brings us to 2019. The agreement then expires at the end of this month, next week. And what staff has suggested and the Parks, Arts, and Community Services and Steering Committee have agreed with is that we would like to do a 1-year study while we evaluate whether or not this use is a compatible use with the restoration occurring at Fairview Park. So what I'd like to do is use a few illustrations to orient you to the park and the use, but also to answer some of the questions that we've heard from the public, I hope, in these next few slides. So this here is an illustration from the master plan that was adopted in 2003 and again in 2008. This is just a piece of that front illustration that you see on the master plan. And I've taken this to focus on the area, but also to explain a little bit, as you've heard earlier, I think Councilmember Reynolds mentioned that the Fairview Park Steering Committee is going through an analysis of the master plan now, and it is to work on areas in the master plan, like down in the bottom left, there's a parking for 10 cars. You see parking lots all over in the current or existing Fairview Park master plan that are not going to be implemented, and play areas, which you see off to the right in front of the elementary school there. And then up by the shelter, there's also a bus turnaround that was planned. So the master plan has a lot of things like this in it that we're hoping to improve and update. And so focusing on tonight's issue, the little red boxes that you see here outlined are where the master plan indicated on the far right, my far right, excuse me, the silent flyer staging area, which points up here. And this is the silent flyer launch landing area right here. And that is where it is today. And then off to the left, off of the bluffs, there is the glider launch, which still exists today as well. Then I'm going to go to the next slide, which What I'm doing here is using the Fairview Park model flying field. This map is posted at the fly field. It is something that all permittees receive when they do get a permit and are expected to follow the rules here. These blue lines, I'm trying to orient you to the vernal pools that are around and how the field lays in the pool. And then the black arrows you see are the flight patterns for the airplanes that are out there, and then the gliders. There's also different glider areas for takeoff and landing. Okay. Then this, there's been a lot of discussion about the size of the field today. 2 days ago, we had staff go out and do an actual measurement and try to put it on a Google map and try to get as close as we can. So the red area that you see here, well, I'm sorry, first, this is vernal pool 1. I think we're all kind of familiar with where vernal pool 1 is. The red area you see here is the approximate area of the landing field, the strip that they take off and land in. Then we've got areas that are used for gathering and where the flyers, bring their equipment. They have picnic tables out there and such. And then there is an extended area that moves along here in the dark yellow or golden it goes down to where those glider launches were I showed in the last series. So this is basically the use area, which ends up being around 40 to 45,000 square foot is what we've marked. Now, we may not have this exactly right, but it's what we were able to do in the field quickly. And then I want to point out one more thing from this corner, the red corner here, to the pool. We tried to measure the distance, and it's approximately 225 feet between the two. And then I use this last one. I love this slide. This is vernal pool 1 in 2011, and we did see it pretty much this full this year as well. This is pool 1. This is Waldorf School, Canyon Drive. This is the red area that you saw on the last map, which is the field, fly field. Is my clicker? Yeah, okay. And then the staging area for the flyers. And then the area of the gliders that I was indicating is now, unfortunately, in the middle of the connection between Pool 1 and Pool 4. So this is an area that we've had to close off seasonally now. There are fairy shrimp in that and or can be transported through there. So we have now fenced this off seasonally and are factoring into our plans a permanent, hopefully, funds permitting, a boardwalk that will actually be in existence here as opposed to the ground trail in that area. So I think this slide also indicates for us the balance that we're trying to strike between restoration and preservation and especially public use that is occurring already out there. It's in close proximity. We get a lot of traffic, foot traffic and bike traffic out there, and so in close proximity to the restoration, it is a tough balance. So in an effort to reach that balance, the ordinance that was created in 2007 permits flyers, and then the city has this web page that I wanted to point out that covers all of the rules and regulations for flying, and with HSS and FAA. So you'll see the list down here. The FAA unmanned aircraft rules are here, how to register your aircraft, Harbor Soaring Society information, AMA safety code, our Parks and Community Services flying rules, the model aircraft ordinance, and the fly field rules are all there. So the actions that have occurred before tonight are that on April 10, 2019, the Fairview Park Steering Committee took up this item, and on May 23, 2019, the Parks, Arts, and Community Services, both the Commission and the Steering Committee approved, as you're reading the motion this evening, a comprehensive evaluation of the value of the partnership between HSS and the city and the compatibility of all flying activity, not just HSS, but permitted activity as well, within the master plan for the Fairview Park and Measure AA that will be done by city staff, city attorney, HSS, and the steering committee within the next year while we have this new agreement. We're asking for the one-year evaluation to allow us to work within the same timeline that the steering committee is developing other measures in the master plan that need to be changed, other amendments to the master plan, if you will. This timeframe would provide for seasonal review of both the public use and avian patterns, as we do have patterns that change seasonally with both the use and the bird activity. It's not just the bird activity we're concerned about, it's also the flora, the plant material as well. It will allow us to collect data on use patterns, which may provide us opportunities for a use modification to come out of the study, meaning maybe we limit days that are open or types of flyers that are done, or maybe it's just seasonal flying. We don't know yet. Those would be some of the questions we'd be asking. We would like to have public participation, at least 2 to 3 general meetings with all types of park users regarding this, maybe be going out to the park and actually doing public interviews while we're out there about the use. The city has approximately 300 permitted flyers. HSS has approximately 50 members. We've only had a conversation with HSS members so far. We really need to reach the rest of those users. And we'd like to coordinate the research with the agencies, regulatory agencies, different nonprofit and for-profit organizations, and academia. They're interested in this information. There aren't really a lot of studies on the impacts of a fly field in a locality like this, where there's such a heavy public use and sensitive habitats. And we'd like to conduct research and give analysis on the compatibility of use with our continued restoration plans. We're seeing a shift. The master plan had been focused on development of the park. As you saw, there were parking lots, tot lots, new amenities for the park in the master plan. The focus has really switched, given Measure AA, to restoration and preservation, and through your efforts. So we need to now look at what's compatible with that restoration, as opposed to, in the master plan, it had been called a passive recreation, and that passive recreation was okay. We need to understand the difference there between those two. So the recommendation is to, as I stated, approve the new updated use agreement, and secondly, to direct staff to conduct the comprehensive evaluation. That's all I have. I know that perhaps the city attorney has updates, and I know that HSS has a presentation this evening as well. Thank you.
Yes, thanks.
So,
Yes, I did.
Ms. Barlow?
Yes, thank you, Madam Mayor, members of the council. Because of the many public questions that have arisen, we have done some additional research. And the FAA did issue a new advisory circular on May 31st, which affects this issue. It is 91-57B, and it replaces and cancels 9157A, which was cited in the draft agreement with HSS. In addition to that, they've issued sort of a temporary restriction on flights above certain limits in airport areas until there are what they're calling letters of agreement, rather, between the users and the air traffic control at particular airports. So in looking at all the data that was available with this brand new change from the FAA, it does appear that 200 feet is the limit for this area without a specific written agreement otherwise. And I know that in the past there has been, and I'm sure the HSS speaker will address this, there may have been a verbal agreement with the airport and air traffic control. Unfortunately, based on what I'm seeing in the FAA very recently issued advisory, it can only be 200. And so what we've done is, in your packet, in your red folder, we've provided a proposed revision to the agreement that references the brand new advisory, indicates the flight limit is 200 feet until they have a written letter of agreement with air traffic control at John Wayne Airport to allow them to fly at the higher level. And I'd be happy to answer any questions.
If anyone has any questions, please be sure to request to speak, and you'll get in the queue. Councilmember Guinness.
Let's see. There's a reference to AMA membership as an alternative to carrying individual insurance. Are there any standards for that, or you just send in your $20 dues and you're in, or whatever the dues is?
Yes, Madam Mayor, Councilmember Gannis. AMA is kind of the governing body, if you will. They offer a membership which covers up to a certain amount in insurance coverage. As you mentioned, you can have individual insurance through your homeowner's insurance. If you don't want to go that route, that's when you go the AMA route. That our permit and our ordinance requires that as well. I don't believe that there's a screening process per se by AMA. Perhaps HSS could speak of that as well. But what happens is when an individual who wants to get a flying permit has either their model aircraft on their homeowner's insurance or they have an active AMA membership, they provide that to the Parks and Community Services Department. We verify that it's an active membership, and then they would then go through the permitting process that each flyer goes through.
And basically, it looks like the vast bulk of the users do not have are not really operating as part of HSS. They're operating independently.
That's correct.
So maybe we should have every one of them here too, or so, I don't know, because from my perspective, HSS for the most part have been good stewards, but there are an awful lot of people out there who are not at all. And one of my questions is, how do we allow people who actually are doing a good job? You know, they're not leaving trash around, they're restricting their area, they're not making a whole lot of noise, they're not harassing our wildlife. How do we allow them while keeping out the other ones? Because basically, I would think probably, from my observations, there's probably at least half of those independent licenses that should be yanked. And then there's a lot of people out there without any licenses. And that may be a legal issue, I don't know.
I think it's very similar to any issue in any of our parks where there's activity that's either illegal or that's causing damage. I mean, littering, smoking, graffiti.
But there isn't anywhere where graffiti, littering, and smoking is legal, though. That's my question.
Correct. But from a citations perspective and from an enforcement perspective, it comes from visibility of park rangers, from education from department part-time staff in the Parks and Community Services Department. It comes from HSS members who are frequently on site providing, eyes and ears and a volunteerism-based spirit for the kind of the betterment of the use of the area.
And as part of this study, would we be looking at possibly tightening up this is so weird, I can't see you guys over the screens. Would we be looking at possibly tightening up our rules for the individual permits? Because that's where I think we really need to do some work.
One of the things we will look at, yes, in the study is the operating system today and how we can better that with perhaps modified uses, if you will. I think enforcement is really what it comes down to. It is not legal to fly out there without a permit currently, but it is the enforcement aspect of it. So we do have to look at that.
And on our PowerPoint, one of the slides, this one, I believe it's the third or fourth page there, it actually shows a start area, a start area south of the path in the vernal pool area. That doesn't, to me, that's not consistent with our master plan. And how did that, what is the source of this map? It's from the HSS folks. And are they actually suggesting that people operate south of the unpaved path in the vernal pool area?
This, as far as I understand, this map was created by HSS as a tool for posting. It looks like the date on the upper my left is under the blue line is 2010, that this was last updated. Are you speaking about here? If you can look at these arrows. I'm sorry.
Oh, well, here.
Yeah. That.
Okay, and then you referenced 40,000 square feet as the area that was used, and this looks like a whole bunch more than that.
There are portions of this that are no longer used, as Mr. Smith let us know. That is part of the reason for needing to do this study. We have many, I think, documents, including, as I illustrated, the cover for the master plan, which has outdated information in it.
Okay, and will the study be looking at the distance from the vernal pond? Because quite frequently in the coastal area, at least, they've been requiring 100 meters as a buffer. So at 225, looks like we're pretty short. So will we be looking at the distance from sensitive resources as part of the study?
I think that's one of the motivations for the study.
And also, I know you want to get a seasonal idea about things, but I have some real concerns about not completing the study until after the nesting season. Because as we know, the nesting season's in the spring, and there have been people who don't obey the rules who actually harassed some of the wildlife. And since it used to be gliders and silent flyers, and the reason this area was so popular was because of the air currents. Well, that's not even a factor for some of these noisy motor-powered things. So it doesn't need to be in Fairview Park. But also when it was just the gliders, the white-tailed kites, not people flying kites, but the birds, the white-tailed kites, seem to coexist pretty nicely with the gliders, no problems. But the motorized planes really seem to have led to a decrease in some of that activity. And so, particularly because we have so much illicit use, I've seen the drones over the ponds, I've seen the drones over the bridge over Placentia. Quite frequently when I pull in, there's a drone over the grass or over the parking lot. So I have real concerns about not resolving this before the next nesting season. So is there any way we could complete this in 6 months?
There has been discussion regarding that, whether or not we could get this done at the end of this year, which would coincide with the permitting aspect of things as well. The permits are in a calendar year. Yes, we could get it done in that time. I think it will take cooperation from the partners, the people who have stepped up already and said that they would like to see this study done, to work with us. And we may have to, out of my office, reprioritize a couple of things before the end of the year. But if we can do that, I think we could accomplish it.
And then, in your judgment, if we, and possibly a park ranger might actually even be the best person to address this, if we were to put a moratorium on new permits, are we likely to just have more of an enforcement issue, do you think, or do you think that might help? Or do you need to do the study first?
Again, all the more reason to do the study. We do meet with the park rangers on a biweekly basis for many park reasons, including this. But having them be part of the study and to garner that feedback, and certainly asking the question about a moratorium would be a worthwhile one.
Thank you.
Councilman Reynolds?
Yep, got a few questions here. I know we've been interacting quite a bit with U.S. Fish and Wildlife on a few other issues. Do we have a statement or recommendation from them on this issue?
Thank you. We do not have an official recommendation from them. I have had numerous conversations with them regarding this, as many of our public has as well, directly with them. I have spoken directly to both state Fish and Wildlife, as well as the Federal Fish and Wildlife. Both are interested in this study in terms of the results from it. Again, in particular, U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, we've had the conversation about there not being regulated decibel levels that they're aware of with regard to looking at the flight patterns and how it impacts birds. So we don't have any official communication with them with regard to recommendations, but we have had conversations. There have been suggestions through emails. I think I forwarded some of those to you, but nothing official.
Okay. So they haven't asked us to cease this activity specifically. They want us to study certain aspects of the activity. Is that?
Well, yes, what they have said, I'm sorry, I'm going to read a quote here that is in one of the responses, a quote of mine. they've not submitted formal recommendation, but what they, in our exchanges, what they have said, and this is quoting from one of the emails, we encourage the city to take responsibility for identifying the limits of disturbance that you are permitting to occur and to provide sufficient enforcement to prevent continued unauthorized access into the vernal pools. So they are working with us on the language specifically of what we need to study and look at right now.
Okay, so they would be a participant in
They
the
would
study
be,
that you're
yes.
proposing? Okay.
Yes.
Can you, so the second part of that statement mentioned conflict with the vernal pools or enforcement around the vernal pools. Can you go to that slide? I think it's the previous one to the one we have here. Oops, no, the slide with the vernal pools. Where you showed where there was one of the paths that overlaps. Yes, there we go. So can you describe what is there planned? Would we be waiting for a study with your recommendation, or is there a sort of planned enforcement activity to avoid any additional impacts or, I guess, infractions in the vernal pools area?
We have.
Okay.
We
Did you
have
understand the
begun to
question?
implement, in the last year and a half, new, different measures. And for instance, right now, in this whole, let me get my clicker here. In this whole area here, we have fencing that is closed off, this entire reach in here. I mean, we still have people that go under it. But, so we have temporary fencing that we have worked with Fish and Wildlife in terms of the location of that fencing and the duration of it, how long it should stay up, and that kind of thing. And we are increasing the signage in terms of impact to habitats. And one of the things we've started doing, I'm trying to think of all the things we're doing, unofficially, through our department, we have assigned staff out there to start doing observations and taking surveys of some of the uses that are going on there now so that we can understand it better. We will continue those through the study so we can learn how we need to better protect this.
Okay, so my understanding is that the proposed evaluation is more focused on the sort of interactions of the above ground flying activity with, or impacts on birds and plants and so on, but protection of the on-ground vernal pool resources is something that you're already working on and planning to enforce. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay.
We have direction, actually, from U.S. Fish and Wildlife for that.
That's what I'm thinking about. Okay. And active restoration efforts as well.
Yes, in fact, in this slide, I can show you, this is Waldorf School. This whole area here is vernal pool 4, 5, 6, and 7, or excuse me, 5, 6, and 7. We are starting that project this calendar year to restore that area.
Okay.
Under the direction of Fish and Wildlife.
I know we've gotten at least one grant recently for that vernal pool restoration. I think we're going after others. Does continued sort of allowing the continued flying activity affect our ability to get any of those grants?
That's a tough call. I think that it could. It depends on the reviewers, I believe. But I think that by the city taking a positive action like this and demonstrating, again, with the discussions we've had with organizations and agencies, demonstrating that we are looking at this as a serious matter and that we intend to address it, I think will be in our favor.
Okay. And you mentioned so that we would be working directly with the state and federal fish and wildlife agencies. You mentioned academic organizations. Who is that?
Well, we've got strong connections at UCI, as you know.
UCI, okay.
But the biology department there, we have had several conversations with different people and different organizations overlap. UCI has a database started that has a lot of our flora and fauna in it that we will be able eventually to connect with, so they're interested on several levels.
Yeah, okay.
With us.
I think those are all my questions right now.
Mayor Pro Tem Stevens?
Yeah, just a couple questions about enforcement. Have any, to your knowledge, have any permits been either suspended or revoked? And if so, what's the order of magnitude of the amount of permits that have been suspended or revoked?
Mayor Pro Tem Stevens, I don't actually have that information readily available. I can find that out. I do know when there are instances that warrant an infraction or something that's more than the common, maybe flying too low or out of the designated area, that park rangers do share that. They do obviously have the authority to issue citations, and they always issue warnings first, obviously. But they do issue citations. I'm not sure of that number. The code also states that I think it quotes the recreation manager, but essentially I have the authority to review that as well and can revoke a permit as well. I have not done that, but that's something that I do have the authority to do as part of this process.
And you've been the recreation manager for as long as I've been elected, so the last 2.5 years, you've never had a revocation or a suspension?
That's correct.
That's come before you. Okay. And then if there, I was just happened to be reading the ordinance while I was also paying very close attention to what Councilmember Reynolds was saying. There's a whole list of things that you're prohibitions in great detail in the ordinance. I didn't see what the consequence or the penalty for violating that ordinance is. What is the penalty for violating the ordinance?
There's certainly a citation. I'm not sure what the dollar value on that citation is, but every citation obviously comes with a dollar value. I'm not sure that the chief would know that off the top of his head. Probably not, I would expect. We can find that out for you, but there is a value that's associated with that, just like any ticket or citation. And then obviously the revocation of the permit, you don't get a refund for the fee that you would have paid to the city.
Okay. And again, just by order of magnitude, your best estimate, how many violations, citations have been issued for violating the ordinance in, say, the last couple of years?
Handfuls.
Okay, thank you.
Nothing extremely significant.
Thank you.
Councilmember Guinness, and then I want to open it up to public comment.
Okay, I just wanted to add one thing. Well, actually, two things now. Because you said just handfuls, I could probably issue that many anytime I'm out in the park. There's a problem there. And I mean, just for the people flying illegally. But there was a question about U.S. Fish and Wildlife. Also, about a half dozen years ago, I was interviewed at their request by U.S. Fish and Wildlife about the various insults that had been visited upon Fairview Park, ranging from the famous DG path to filling in the vernal marsh with the parking, the filling of the canyon, miscellaneous other things. And it was Fish and Wildlife staff that introduced the topic of the planes, the noisy motorized planes. They were very, very concerned about them. And so I don't know what they've actually, what kind of written exchanges you have had, but their staff was very, very concerned about the drones in particular in the park.
I would say that that continues to be the case.
Okay. Thanks.
Okay, we're going to open this item up for public comment. If you'd like to speak to this item, please come to one of the two podiums, and I'd ask that you line up at each podium so we could keep the speakers moving through the process. Good evening.
Good evening. I'm Henry Smith, current serving vice president of Harbor Soaring Society. I'm a relatively new member of the management team on the society. I've been in the society for about 12 years. There's some old timers in this room that have been flying in the park since before it was a city park. It still belonged to the county. Some of the people that are here tonight flew then. Anyway, I'm going to mention just a couple things before I start with my presentation. One is regarding the insurance. In addition to everybody having proof of insurance to get a permit, the AMA also furnishes the city a separate policy naming the city as an additional insured to cover anything that happens when the club is operating in the park. And that policy costs the club some money, but doesn't cost the city anything. We pay for that out of the club treasury. And about the FAA, I have a pilot's license. I'm not current anymore, and I'm really not an expert on this topic anymore, but the FAA at Orange County is aware of our existence. Otherwise, we wouldn't show up on the list that the city lawyer looked at to find out where we are. And the other thing I know about the FAA is they will not surrender their authority to regulate things that fly. And this authority goes all the way to the ground. Once it's in the air, it's the purview of the FAA, and the city really can't influence that legally. It's a federal thing. And the other thing I know is that the city is allowed to regulate where you take off and land, and the city should do that. That's what good government's for. But no, and the city of Los Angeles found this out a couple of years ago, and they were trying to put a drone regulation in place. So on to our presentation. So, which is the button that there we go.
Mr.
We've
Smith?
been around for a
Mr.
long
Smith?
time.
Mr. Smith,
yes.
So how long do you think your presentation is? Because you've already taken up 2 minutes of your time.
I'm going to zoom right through this.
Okay. You think you'll need more than the?
We've been around here a long time. I've got a couple of slides in here that I think are very important. This is an interesting one that shows the 93,000 square feet we're alleged to be operating on. And the yellow line is what we've been given by some people. And the red is my pretty approximate listing of where the current runway is. We fly, the society follows the rules and regulations, and we provide the city with insurance, and right now we have 70 members, or maybe 71, and there's a lot of members that are not members that use the facilities that were put out there by the society, and the current agreement was we can't change that. If a permit holder shows up and wants to fly, there's nothing we can do about it. This income provides the city a little bit of money to compensate for some of the issuing the permits and other things. We take up a very small portion of the park, less than 0.5% of the total area in the park. We try to benefit the city and the community with community outreach and service. Here we're working with the Boy Scouts. Here, just a few years ago, we helped the city put up a few signs out in the park when they were having some issues with a contractor. There's a cleanup committee picture here. We've taken some aerial photographs, and in fact, I think the photograph that Cynthia showed was provided to the city by one of our members. We participate in the Imaginology show at the fairgrounds every year. I'm one of the instructors out at the flying field. I give flying lessons, free flying lessons, batteries included. Council members are free also, if you want to try to learn to fly. I have literally had students from 8 to 88 learn to fly. These are two of my students. Jack is not here with us tonight, but he's about 12 years old, and he's one of the best pilots out there. Justin Tam will speak to you this evening. He's a very outstanding young man who's been involved in model aviation for the last few years, and another one of my students I taught to fly. There's another community outreach thing with one of our members teaching a class at a local school. This is one of our friends. I like this guy. He's out there quite often. You see him around. He's been hanging out with us for years. Either he or his descendants or cousins. And we really are willing and anxious to work with the city to improve the situation out here. And speaking for myself, not necessarily from the society standpoint, speaking for myself, it can stand some improvement. And I'll do whatever I can to help you out. So thank you.
Thank you. Thanks so much. Okay. Yes?
Hi, my name is Justin Tam. I'm currently a senior in high school. And as Henry said, I won the National Youth Leadership Award by the AMA this year to represent the young model aviators for the AMA. So when I was 12 years old, I was just like any other kid. Video games 24/7, go to school, hit the PlayStation 4, and lock myself in the room. And I mean, that was the life, but it was a boring life now that I think about it. And thanks to Henry and everyone at the HSS, they've made me be different. They've taught me to go outside, enjoy this nature outside, and enjoy it and just feel stress-free without those horrible math tests, those dreadful basketball games where your legs feel like they're gonna fall off. And I mean, it's helped a lot. And it also helped one of my friends. One of my friends have been suffering depression over the last year or two. And I mean, it's from school and all that, but I wanted to introduce this to him. And for the first time in 6 years, I've seen him truly smile and be happy. No facade like your high school jock, nerd, bystander, wallflower, none of that. He was genuinely happy. And I can see that for any high schooler, because high schoolers, I mean, we all fake to survive in high school. It's a matter of getting out of there and get out and go to college. But in the field, you feel welcome by everyone, regardless of your age and just your background in general. And thanks to Henry, I've felt welcome, and it changed me as a person and the man I am today, and it's prevented me from being locked in my room and enjoying the outdoors. Now I'm not surviving, I'm living my life. Thank you.
Thank you. Good evening.
Good evening. My name is Paula Hong, and I'm a mother of 3. This is Caleb Hong, my oldest son, and we enjoy walks at Fairview Park often as a family. And one time recently, the boys, I have 2 sons, they enjoy watching the planes fly, and one time Caleb was at the field and the men said, if you're interested in flying, we'll teach you how to fly. And Caleb was very interested, so we ended up starting a relationship with Henry Smith, who spoke previously, and he's been teaching Caleb how to fly the airplanes, and he's had a very uplifting experience working with not only Henry, but the other men who are regulars there. And Caleb does have a form of mild cerebral palsy, and certain athletic ventures are difficult for him, but through the patience and kindness of the teachers there, he's really been able to learn to fly the planes, and he's been bonding with the men who hang out at the field. And so we've had a really positive experience. I grew up in Costa Mesa. I ran cross country at Fairview Park for Estancia High School. So yeah, so we would really like to see this positive part of our community remain at Fairview Park. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening, Council. Thank you, Katrina, for allowing me to speak. Councilmember Arliss and Sandy, thank you for your comments. We appreciate them very much. I have a couple of things to address. First of all, I personally love the Harbor Soaring Society. I loved watching the gliders. It was great to see the interactions between the older citizens and the younger citizens. It was fantastic. But a friend of mine and I were over at Fairview Park one day about probably 2 months ago. And as we were driving out the driveway, a plane crashed about 3 feet from the driveway out of the parking lot. A pretty good sized plane. And of course, all we could think about is that poor little kid. But what if it hadn't landed on the lawn? That's one concern. I know shit happens, you know, but it was pretty scary. Also, with regard to the enforcement and ticketing of those who disobey the rules, it really doesn't happen. I have talked to both the male security guard probably 3 or 4 times and the female security guard 2 to 3 times about dogs off leash, about a mini bike that was zooming around through the park during regular park hours, about a drone that was harassing nesting kites, scaring them off their nest. I have seen these things with my own eyes. And it's horrible. It's just horrible for everybody. So although I do support Harbor Soaring Society for soaring, I'm just really tired of being buzzed by airplanes, by fighter jets, and by drones. It's just ridiculous. So thank you very much for letting me speak. My name, by the way, is Ann Harmer. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker.
Good evening. I'm here to talk about the agreement. I think there are a number of reasons why it should not be renewed. I think an evaluation is always a wonderful thing to do, but I don't think you need an agreement in order to evaluate. You can see right here that 250 feet is too close to the vernal pools. Actually, there's not supposed to be any grading. according to Measure AA. It needs a vote of the people. It's been graded multiple times. It has damaged the plants and the endangered species. The next one, this is in 2006, where it was graded again. No SEQA review was ever done. So that's part of the agreement for them to maintain this. They should not be doing anything out there. In fact, they shouldn't even be there because, according to the Fairview Park Master Plan, they're supposed to be next to the bathrooms. It's a silent glider, a land and launch site, and it's supposed to be next to the bathrooms. I'll go, these are the birds being harassed. This is where it's supposed to be. And you can see it's far away from the vernal pools. And so this runway isn't even supposed to be there. And because of the environmental baseline changing, it does require a CEQA review. The resources have changed. There have been endangered fairy shrimp, there's endangered species, so that it does require a CEQA review, and that's not part of the agreement which needs to be done. This is the city's own slide they presented, and you can see that it goes right into the vernal pools. I love the Harbor Soaring Society, and so I love the old guys, but I do think that we need to protect the resources because they can pretty much fly anywhere. And I have found a place where they can fly. They can fly, this is the FAA, not over 200 feet. You already got that information. Also, U.S. Fish and Wildlife, you can't just change the master plan. They believe the city's promise in the Fairview Park Master Plan to protect these resources. That's why it was excluded from the critical habitat. And it says that because that the Fairview Park Regional Park outweigh the benefits of including this area in the critical habitat designation, that's why it was exempt. So you can't just say there is Endangered Species Act, there's Clean Water Act, there's Bird Migrating Treaty Act. All these are laws that need to be followed. So the CEQA review needs to be part of this agreement. There are other places to fly within 28 miles. In Trabuco Canyon, you can fly even gas-powered aircraft. They have a whole site, also in El Dorado. So there's other places too. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, sir. Please.
My name is James Hansen. I am a resident of Costa Mesa for over 65 years. I've been flying model airplanes for approximately 30 years off and on, both non-powered and powered aircraft, free flight, RC, fixed wing, rotary wing, a little bit of everything. And I've been flying, like I said, I've been with the Harbor Soaring Society, President, Club Treasurer, and Assistant Safety Officer. I just want to let everybody know here that we do our utmost at Club and AMA to promote safety and keep our fellow flyers, club members and non-income members, all ages, including the Jason, Jack, Kyle, flying in a safe manner, do everything we can to educate them and promote safety flying and enjoyable flying at Fairview Park. We have still a record of basically 0 incidents of anybody being injured by these aircraft. There are a few minor propeller bites. People, that's one thing that is a problem, but I've got a few scars. I won't go that deep. But the planes itself are, if properly maintained and flown, are perfectly safe. I do fly rotary wing aircraft, aka drones. The modern technology has gotten so advanced that if they're properly maintained, which I do, and I teach other people how to properly maintain them, there's pretty much 0% of these things coming out of the sky and injure anybody. They do not make the modern drones are very quiet, very unobtrusive, and very safe. They have obstacle avoidance when flown in the proper manner. They are perfectly safe and do not infringe on any of the wildlife, the people in the park. There are certain individuals, as you are well aware of, that prefer to fly in an unsafe manner. It's an adrenaline thing with them, whatever it is. I myself, being now in my late 70s, retired, I enjoy more of the leisure airplanes. even though they fly electrics. The electrics I fly are very quiet, and I challenge you to hear them if you got more than, let's say, 200 feet away from them when they're in the air. They do not make, there are some that are loud. The ones I fly are fairly quiet. They do have electric motors and propellers, and they're quiet compared to the internal combustion engine airplanes. And those, of course, are not permitted at Fairview Park. So thank you very much for your time, and have a good day.
Thank you so much.
Good evening, Council. Jay Humphrey, Costa Mesa resident again. A couple of things. I have two hats tonight. My first hat is speaking as a member of the Fairview Park Alliance, and you've already received our letter, which clearly states our position, which basically is we support gliders, but no powered planes, and certainly no drones. And the reasons are myriad. They are listed in the letter, so that statement is there. Now, my other hat is my Jay Humphrey hat, and there's a couple of things. I appreciate the city wanting to do a study to see what the impacts are. Well, the problem is that without complete cessation of all flying, you'll never know what impact is happening to the birds, to the a variety of burrowing animals, to any of the flora and fauna in the park, because no matter what you see in the future, if the planes are all flying, is directly related to that. And I'll give you a quick little scenario. When I first moved to town, all the kids in the area I live in Mesa Verde, would take the bus to school. And I talked to the city about it because I like my kids to have been able to ride their bikes, but they couldn't because they couldn't cross Baker. And the city said, well, we have nobody riding their bikes to school from Mesa Verde area where you live because they all take the bus. And I said, until you look and see who takes the school because they have safety, and sure enough, we now have 2 lights, 2 stop signs, and crossing guards, and guess what? All those kids walk to school or ride their bikes to school now. And it's because they had the opportunity to actually have the incident that was causing everybody to say, oh, look, we don't cause any problem because we have a hawk on a sign doesn't mean that there aren't a lot of other animals and birds affected. And what you can't do is you can't make the assumption that you let them all fly and, well, we didn't see any change in the bird population. That doesn't tell you anything because they're still flying. So if you're going to do a study, do a real study that actually looks at what the impacts are and what the impacts are not in that setting. A council prior to this time made some mistakes. They chose to allow the powered planes here, and they never should have been allowed in the first place because of all the things being stated. You guys have the opportunity now to fix that problem. I like the Harbor Soaring Society myself, but by the same token, there's other greater, longer term resources that we need to protect, we need to think about. We need to think about in the sense of for all of our community, not a smaller part of that community. And it's very important that we recognize clearly what we need to do on that. You have the opportunity to actually fix the problem. I hope you take the best steps to do that. Thank you very much.
Hi, my name is Jordan Lappin, and I'm 15 years old. I'd say a little over a year ago, I wanted to learn how to fly model planes because I have an interest in aviation. So I went online and I looked up places to fly near me, and I got onto the Harbor Soaring Society website. And my mom drove me to the hobby store, first of all. We picked up a plane there. Little did I know I didn't pick up a beginner plane. And we drove over to the field and then got Henry's contact info and met with him on Saturday and had my first lesson there with Ted and Henry. And Ted explained the controls to me, and Henry taught me how to fly with the club train. We went up, the club plane, we went up a few times with that and then switched over to the plane I got. That was interesting. I like Fairview because it's really close to my house. There's not really any places, like was stated before, Chabuco it's about 40 minutes away. It's not, I wouldn't say it's worth it flying there. There's a bunch of power lines in the way, the runway's kind of short. It's not an enjoyable experience there. At Fairview, it's nice and quiet there. There's nothing in the way if you're flying. And the people there are so much nicer. Everybody's friendly, and no matter what age you are, you'll talk with anybody. For instance, there's a guy named Tom out there. He's 92, and he's a close friend of mine that I see out there when I go to fly all the time. And sorry. Before I did flying, I used to just sit on my computer all day, probably for like 6 hours a day. Just get home from school, close my door, put on my headphones, and just play video games all day. Now I don't really touch my computer. I'm mostly in the garage tinkering with my airplanes. I have, I think, about over 30 of them now. But yeah, it's just really fun. So I really hope Fairview does get to stay open. And thank you for listening.
Thank you so much. Next speaker.
Robin Leffler, longtime user and appreciator of Fairview Park. It's a real gem that we have here. I support silent flyers. I think they've been an asset to the community. They've been a fun thing to go see at the park. I have seen people with motorized planes harass birds. I was appalled. I was appalled watching somebody chase a bird and laughing with one of his buddies about it. I looked for a ranger. There was no ranger. So I think that this should be restricted to the silent planes or the very, very quiet ones, and that it should be much more closely policed and that the rules should be enforced, because I seldom see the rangers down there. They need to be there several times during the day and keep a close eye on what's really happening there on the fields. I'm very concerned about this. I think that it should revert to what it was originally, a nice field for silent flyers, and that it should be watched real carefully. Thank you.
Next speaker.
Hi, I think I'm the last one. I'll make it quick. Just as a mother and just watching all these kids become who they are, I just want to let you know what a safe haven that has been for a working mom like us. I mean, I know there's a few somewhere really far South Orange County, but we couldn't make it there as a working mom on a weekday. These kids actually beg us to take them to fly, and then we'll go eat at Holy Moly and all these restaurants around. So we love Costa Mesa. We hope that it's going to stay. And I also want to assure you that Henry and everybody here, number one is safety and rules. So when I pick my kids up and drop them off here, I just go walk and look at birds and hike by myself. It's the only time I can exercise. I don't hear any plane. And if you see some kids being obnoxious, we will not tolerate that. I will be the first mother out there and picking that kid up and bringing him to a ranger. So that it's not the normal that we see. So if there are any anomaly, let us know. We will be the first one to make sure we train them correctly. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, this will be our last speaker.
Okay, just a minute. Let me get my glasses so I can see what I'm reading. Okay, so what Jay Humphrey was referencing was what they call a baseline. So you can't establish a baseline unless you start from where there has been no impact, and that's like what exists there for a good amount of time. And then you can establish how other things might impact that baseline. I support the Fairview Park Alliance, and I support responsible operators. Just like with automobiles, there are drivers that they just have no regard for the law or how their actions might negatively impact others around them. I find a lot of the planes noisy, annoying, distracting, and it takes away the peacefulness of the park experience. And I support the gliders only. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, council, we're closed public comment. Council, I'll take a motion. Oh, I'm sorry. Sir, did you want to speak? Okay. If there's anyone else who wishes to speak to this item, now is the time. Please come up to the podium. Don't just sit in your seat. Come to the podium so I know you're ready to speak. Yes.
Thank you. John Anderson, Harbor Soaring Society General Director.
I've had my turn doing some environmental work, some of you may remember. I would note Fairview is a very active multiple-use park, so that a lot of things are going on. As a senior rated Air Force Auxiliary Aerospace Education Officer with Squadron 68 based in Costa Mesa, I have a duty and a privilege to provide related information and instruction to the American general public, and especially to our youth. For example, my most recent assignment last week was to provide, for the third year, 7 days of STEM-related design, build, fly instruction, including RC simulators and RC model flying, to 48 air-minded cadets at Edwards Air Force Base Flight Test Center. What a very special place to fly. Of course, Fairview is very competitive with that. As an HSS, as a Harbor Soaring Society General Director, along with other officers and members over the years, I have provided considerable aerospace education to Costa Mesa schools, Teen Center, Girls Inc., and such. I set aside my HSS outreach activities for time to prepare for my aerospace education officer duties, but I've recently returned to resume those activities, much of which will likely be based on Fairview Park being available for flying. At a time when the Air Force is pressing for and funding more aerospace education efforts, model flying fields are disappearing, and model flyers are increasingly constrained by new drone-related regulations. Given the local airspace and model flying field location, Fairview Park is a regionally important aerospace education resource. But various emerging environmental, operational, and regulatory issues need to be effectively addressed and satisfactorily resolved, and that's where you're heading with the 1 year. Speaking for myself as an aerospace education officer and Harbor Soaring Society General Director, I will work very hard, personally and with others, to help provide significant aerospace-related STEM education and recreation to youth and adults of Costa Mesa. However, any success will ultimately depend in large part on the ongoing availability of a place to fly. Hopefully at the current Fairview Park Model Airport. Thank you for the privileges of the past and consideration of positive possibilities for the future. Any questions?
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next speaker.
My name is John Rittenhouse. I'm a long-term resident of Costa Mesa. Some of you know who I am. For the last 6 months, I've been the president of Harbor Soaring Society. I didn't really intend to speak tonight. I think pretty much all the various topics have been covered. As I alluded to, I have been the president of the club for the last 6 months, but I've been out in the park since the 70s. A couple of the photos you saw in Henry's presentation back in the 70s, that was me throwing gliders. I look a lot different now. The point I'm trying to make is that I understand the other side, Kim and some of the other folks from the Fairview Park Alliance. They're very passionate about the environment and the wildlife out in the park, and so are we. I've been out there since the late 60s. I've enjoyed the park as flying model airplanes and walking my dog and all the other activities out there. And I would just ask that since there is a process, the process where we have been negotiating with Cynthia, the Fairview Park administrator, and we have spoken before the Fairview Park Steering Committee and the Arts and Parks Committee, whatever it's called at this point. And I think we've gotten unanimous votes for this evaluative process. And I would just ask that since there is a protocol, we've proceeded along this protocol to this point, and I think we're pretty much in good graces with everyone in that you allow the process to go forward and let us have our day in court, so to speak, and say our piece. And if it works out that we are, our use agreement is nullified, at least we had the chance to make our case, and you know, the preponderance of evidence went against us. So I would ask that you give us that opportunity, and we would appreciate that, and I appreciate your time tonight. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Next speaker, sir.
My name is Don Wittenberg. I've been a member of the Harbor Soaring Society for a number of years. There seems to be a mindset that it's either one way or the other, that we have an airfield, or we have to shut it down because of environmental concerns. I believe that there should be sensible rules, and then those rules should be enforced. So we have a one-year period to state our cases, and everybody can evaluate them. I think there are improvements that could be made to the rules and regulations, but again, those rules need to be enforced. I would say that after over 50 years of coexistence of the Harbor Soaring Society and the park environment, there is an abundance of wildlife. I see squirrels running across the airfield. I see hawks that have that circle overhead, and that sometimes are chased away by smaller birds that chase the hawks away from the nests. And I've seen a coyote that lopes across the field. I think our program does show respect for the environment, and we look forward to working with the park management if improvements need to be made. So I would urge the council to approve the current use agreement and go ahead with the one-year evaluation. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Next speaker.
Good evening. My name is Bettina Eastman. I grew up in Costa Mesa. I'm a longtime user of Fairview Park, and I was actually birding there just the other day. I wanted to speak to a couple of the things that you had questions on and what this gentleman just spoke about. I actually spoke to a park ranger about dog leash enforcement because they don't even enforce the dog leash laws, and she basically said that it wasn't really worthwhile to write citations for people with dogs off their leash because the fine was too small and it would tie up the courts with people and they wouldn't show up for the citation anyways. So my concern is that although I have seen an increase in park rangers and I have seen an increase in security, if there's no enforcement, and I actually spoke to her about drones and aircraft, and she didn't really understand. She said, well, that's up to those people that run those aircraft. And if there's only 70 members, but over 300 permitted flyers, and that's not to mention all the flyers that don't have permits, where is the regulation happening? Where is the enforcement happening? To address one of your council members' questions about white-tailed kites. White-tailed kites did breed in Fairview Park last year, but they are not currently in Fairview Park this year. They are a species of special concern in Orange County, and as far as we can see, they have been extirpated this year from breeding there. So there are a lot of issues that I'm truly concerned about. And even if you were to renew this agreement, that doesn't address all the flyers that are illegally flying or aren't permitted or aren't part of HSS. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Helpful information. Thank you. This
My
will be
name
our
is-
last speaker.
Okay, good.
I said that
My name is
before.
Dave Merriweather. I'm an associate vice president with the AMA, the national organization. My primary responsibility is Orange County. So I will be working very closely with Harbor Soaring Society. I only picked up on this a couple months ago. So I will be working with that. We have a lot of national resources that we can bring that offer the city things and offer the flyers things. But it is a national organization that has a lot of resources that we can tap into to get information and to see how we can help the city and the citizens. Thank you.
Thank you. If you could give your card to, okay, you have it. Okay. Thank you so much, sir. Okay, we will close public comment at this time, and I will entertain a motion.
Madam Mayor?
We're going to get a motion on the floor, and then we'll take questions. Councilmember Mansour?
Yes, I move the recommended action, and I would like to speak to the motion if I could.
Okay, first let's see if we have a second. Okay, motion. Okay. Okay, Councilmember Mansour, can you request to speak, and I'll give you the floor.
Oh, I was, but
How do you turn your mic off? There we go. Okay.
all right.
There we go.
So, first of all, thank you to the young people that spoke tonight. Justin, Tam, and I apologize, I didn't get your name, but thank you. And thank you for your inspirational stories and coming up here to tell all of us that. If we can get any kids off their phones, off their computers, off their video games, and out to the park, I mean, that's, even if it's just one, I mean, that's a victory. And I don't know how else to say that. My kids are much younger than you. They're 5, 3, almost 2, and now we have one that's 2 weeks old. But the 2 oldest ones love the airplanes, especially the 3-year-old. We cannot go to Fairview Park without him saying, oh, we have to go see the airplanes. And he just loves them. And I know how much time I'm on my phone and trying to put my phone away, and I need something to counterbalance that. And they do biking, they do walking, they do all the passive stuff too, but there's other things that motivate them. So I would like to ask the model engineers, maybe if we could do some self-policing and some peer pressure. It sounds like there are a couple bad apples, as there are in any group or any event anywhere. You're going to find people who are the bad apples. And if they're chasing birds or flying where they're not supposed to, by all means, say something, talk to them. I don't think we can require everyone to be part of Harbor Soaring Society. It would be nice if they all were, and we're all responsible flyers. And if we need to weed those out through some enforcement, so be it. I'll admit, I was a bit cynical when I saw this, because cynical and skeptical. I want this agreement to be, quite frankly, for longer, but but when Harbor Soaring Society said, hey, we want this, we want this self-evaluation, we want the 1 year, hey, then I will support it. But my cynical thinking or skepticism is that there are those that do want this completely shut down. Some may say, okay, a compromise, and I get it. But there are some that want you out completely, and I don't want to see this shut down completely. And let's not throw the baby out with the bathwater. Let's have an honest assessment and get some enforcement of the bad apples, and get everybody some good training. Thank you.
Mayor Pro Tem Stevens.
Well, I seconded the motion for discussion, and if there's going to be a substitute motion, I'll consider that too in terms of my voting. But I just wanted to comment on some of the aspects of what I heard tonight. I was really touched and moved, actually, by what I heard about the older flyers helping with the young flyers and getting them off their computers and helping them, and the discussion. I have a high school senior who just graduated, and I thought your comments about being in high school were great. I was in high school once, and you know, it hasn't changed all that much. I was faking it back then too. So those are tough years, and so thank you to you guys for giving these adolescents and these kids an outlet. And also the mom who talked about the child with cerebral palsy who's here, I think. And the fact that, you know, we spend so much time dealing with kids that are playing soccer and baseball and softball and stuff like that. And that's not all for all kids. And so this is a great outlet for kids that maybe, some that are athletic and some maybe that aren't. And so I think it's really great. So I do not intend to vote for anything that would prevent that type of activity from going forward. I can tell you that much. Having said that, I will also say, if that's the intent, because I did read very carefully the Fairview Alliance's letter, and honestly, I mean, it's a great organization. I support it. I supported AA. I think it's a great organization, and I like what they stand for. But, you know, when I read statements like the expansion and operation of the airfield have adversely impacted sensitive wildlife and plant species in Fairview Park, as an attorney, what I'm looking for then is data to support that assertion. And I do not see that data in this letter. I see a lot of generalized statements about how important the park is, which I agree with, how important the environment is, and endangered species. But what I don't see is any data that shows that there's a causal nexus between anything that's being done by the Harbor Soaring Society or any of the other permitted operators and any actual damage to those parks. It might be there, it's just not included in the letter. So if that is something, as we go through the process and we get an evaluation, if that's the way the vote goes, and if the Fairview Preservation Alliance wants me personally to take their assertions seriously, they need to back them up with better data. As to the enforcement, though, I have no doubt that there are scofflaws out there doing crazy things like that, and it does raise an issue of concern that there are virtually no permits that have been pulled, revoked, or suspended, very little in terms of citations, and so I do think we do need to work on that. But, and like I said, I'm going to withhold. I'm not saying I'm supporting the motion necessarily. I was happy to second it for discussion. I'm going to listen to whatever else happens here, and I'm going to vote my conscience.
Councilmember Marr.
Yeah, I had a couple of questions for Mr. Smith or whomever from the Soaring Society would like to potentially answer them.
Mr. Smith, can you come up to the podium, please?
Thank you. I'm wondering, of all of the aircraft that are flown by the Soaring Society, what percentage of them are RC versus glider?
Well, all RC is a short for radio control.
Okay, I'm sorry.
And they're all radio controlled. And probably the vast majority, I don't have any hard statistics, but probably 80 or 90% of the airplanes out there are powered. Now that in itself covers a multitude of sins, because some powered airplanes you can't hear when they're on the other side of this room, and some of them make quite a bit of noise, which I myself don't care for. And frankly, the situation could probably stand some improvement.
How so?
Well, basically improve the behavior of the pilots, and you know, and the airplanes have gotten quieter in the last few years. Some of the real noisy airplanes have kind of gone out of fashion, and it truly has gotten a lot quieter out there in the last few years. Yeah, and just technology is taking care of it. It's something I said to the city council the last time I spoke in behalf of the agreement that's going to expire in a few days. But I said that I'm an engineer by education and practice, and anything that makes a lot of noise but does not need to make noise, the engineering isn't finished yet, and I find this sort of thing extremely irritating, and I'd like to be able to work with the city to help control this. But, yeah.
So, pardon my opportunity for making a comment. So I was an aerospace engineering major at the Naval Academy, and my senior project was to make the quietest, most radar undetected drone / RC aircraft possible. And so I have a great deal of sympathy for your comment about being an engineer who wants it to be as quiet and as stealthy as possible. So thank you, I appreciate that. I'm wondering, so motorized planes versus gliders, do gliders require more or less runway space or launching space?
Well, the gliders, the pure gliders, are launched with a winch, and that string can be, the winch line can be 600-700 feet long. Most airplanes can fly out of a 100-foot space, you know, so the gliders require a fair amount of space, or an airplane requires it, but the space is slightly different.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then once the aircraft are actually launched, are you flying over the entire park effectively, or are you staying within a sort of a radius that you can?
The rules require that you stay to the west side of the path that's shown on that map. And I have a tendency to yell at people who don't do that. And very few people do. And the area down in the lower left corner there where it says, I think it's bungee cord launching or something, that area is no longer used. High start launching, yeah, it's basically a big rubber band to launch a glider. That particular area is no longer used because it's full of 8-foot high mustard. We can't use it anymore. And I have left it like that on purpose to keep people out of there. And there's some other places that we don't mow for the same reason, to keep airplanes and people out of there. And that has also improved the operation of the field a little bit in the last few years. Yeah.
Okay, and the reason we're staying on the west side is just because we don't want aircraft flying over Placentia, is that?
Well, you don't want people flying over the park or the parking lot or the school, so
Okay.
you stay on the west side.
Okay, I'm just thinking on the east side of Placentia is already far more disturbed land where the model engineers are, and whether there was any potential to be.
There's not, over there where the railroad track is, there's not really room for an airplane field.
Okay, all right, thank you very much for answering my question.
Thank you. Okay, thank you, Mr. Smith. Councilmember Guinness.
I also have a couple questions for the flying people. I'm kind of surprised that there's not room for an airfield, seeing as how we had people who thought there was room for a whole soccer field, which is a lot more acreage. But anyway, you mentioned mowing. How much area have you mowed in the past?
Well, the picture shows what we mow. We mow, go back to that red area is and the dark
So
yellow.
basically around the field.
Yeah, we don't
I
mow
thought
anything.
all this stuff, and I was gonna.
We haven't mowed. Well, our mower's about worn out, and we haven't. We only mow the area where that's in red and yellow there on this map, the front that Cynthia's people made, which is I believe this map to be quite accurate.
Okay, because this shows significant areas, and if you were mowing all that, I was going to suggest that we stop that, like post haste.
I'm not that ambitious.
Councilmember Guinness, I'd like
and
to
I run the
address
mower.
that.
Okay.
I'd just like to note that the mowing that does take place is authorized through our department. It is something that they have to check in with us before they do. We do the bird nesting surveys. It's a specific area, and it has not exceeded its boundary that I can tell.
Okay, because there's a couple things on the mowing. On the one hand, makes it easier for the raptors to spot the little rodents, but on the other hand, there's less habitat for the rodents too. So 6 1, half dozen the other maybe.
The place where you see the mice is out in that mustard because they can hide from the hawks.
Exactly, yeah. And they also get their diet. Now, perhaps the gentleman from the AMA could answer. Do you ever boot anybody out of the AMA? Do they just send you money and then they're in? It's like subscribing to a magazine or something, or do you actually screen people?
The AMA has roughly 300,000 members, and we've got 2,400 clubs across the country that we offer the insurance coverage on. In order to be covered by that insurance, you have to be an AMA member, and you are supposed to abide by the AMA Flying Safety Code, which the city has adopted. And that's also a nationwide code. Has anybody ever been thrown out of it? Not that I know of, because the AMA doesn't run the clubs. Now, I was a president of the flying club at the Great Park, Orange Coast Radio Control Club, and we had a couple flyers that were doing things they were not supposed to, and yes, we threw them out of the club because that would jeopardize our license to be where we were. We didn't have a lease. We had a license with the county, and it would jeopardize our insurance coverage. So the club is responsible to ensure that the club members do what they're supposed to be doing and not do the things they're not supposed to.
Thank you.
And at that location, did you coexist with individual permittees, or was it exclusively?
It was exclusive. Where there's coexistence, it becomes very cloudy, which is one of the things that we'll be working on. Who can enforce what becomes a real issue. If it's just an exclusive arrangement, then yes, the club can police all of its members, and if they don't do what they're supposed to, they can take their membership away from them.
Okay, Councilmember Guinness, did you have any other comments? We're going to.
Yeah, I do, actually. Got to go to the home panel now. I don't have any more questions, but I do have a comment. I actually believe the Harbor Soaring Society has pretty much, I might not have graded that runway quite that way, but I believe they've been good stewards of the park. But unfortunately, because of the way we have everybody coexisting, we have an awful lot of people who are not any kind of stewards of the park. In fact, there are a lot of bad apples. It's not just a few bad apples. There are a lot of bad apples out there, and unfortunately, our enforcement has been nil. We had park ambassadors for a while who mostly just smiled and waved at everybody, so no matter what you were doing, you were led to believe it was perfectly okay. The reason they were replaced by park rangers was so that we could get some enforcement. It's disappointing to learn that we're not getting any enforcement, but that's a different issue, I guess. Maybe not. So anyway, I am going to attempt a substitute motion, and then I will address it. I would like to move that we extend the contract for a year, but that we have the study come back in 6 months, because all of our agreements always have a thing where we could have an out if we need. But that the study come back in 6 months. I don't believe, well, I'll see if I get a second.
Councilmember Guinness, can you tap make motion, please?
Oh, make motion, okay.
Okay, is there a second?
I want a second.
Okay, you did or did not?
I guess it went away, but whatever. It's fine.
Madam Mayor, I seconded.
I think that Councilmember Chavez seconded first, so can you undo your second, Councilmember Reynolds?
Will it even accept it?
I don't know.
Can you undo the second?
It doesn't matter to me. It doesn't matter to me.
Are you withdrawing your second?
No, I'm not, but.
Okay.
We'll let Brenda.
Okay. Councilmember Guinness spoke to the motion. Councilmember.
Oh, I wasn't done.
Okay.
I was leading up to
one item on the agenda.
Okay.
Okay.
One reason, and I will explain why I want this to come back in 6 months, if at all possible, is while I see the rationale of a seasonal study, the point was made that we have no baseline, so a seasonal study doesn't mean anything anyway. So I really would like to see us resolve this before the next nesting season, particularly regarding the people who probably aren't part of Harbor Soaring Society. And possibly at that point, because it will coincide with the new licenses, we might at that point decide to enter into it. I see very numerous potentials that I would like to see examined. For example, maybe an exclusive arrangement if that's legal, or a moratorium on the new individual licenses. All of this needs to be coupled with better enforcement, but since we have no baseline, a seasonal study isn't terribly meaningful to me, and I would like to see this done before we have problems with animals, with particularly some of our raptors unable to nest and unable to fledge because the study's still going on.
Councilmember Chavez.
Hold
on. You have to request your mic because she still has.
I've been red for a while.
Okay.
I've been quiet for a bit. First of all, thank you everyone who came today. Particularly, thank you to all the young people who came. I understand how hard it is sometimes to leave your room, leave the refuge of the internet, of PS4. I had the same issue sometimes too. I think it's great to have different uses for our favorite park. You know, I always say, to me, Fairview Park is Puke Hill, where I would run for volleyball and soccer and go through rigorous training and get better. And at the same time, I learned to appreciate nature that was here in our city. I think Councilmember Guinness made a very fair motion. I see a path here that everyone wins something. We have a chance to assess this earlier than a year and really see whether or not having this agreement is good for our endangered species. We have a chance to allow HSS and all those residents who use the park for their lanes a chance to make their case and say, hey, we're not adversely affecting the wildlife. I think this is very fair. I think this allows us to utilize our park in different ways, and I'll support the motion.
Madam Mayor, can I make one comment before?
Yes, Ms. Letourneau.
I just, Cynthia spoke to this. I just want to emphasize to the council before the vote that although she said she can meet this deadline, but it's going to cause some challenges. There's limited staff in her office, and so we're going to have to reprioritize the work, which we're absolutely happy to do. I just want to make sure that some other things that she's working on, those timelines are going to have to get pushed back. So.
Right. When I get a chance finally to speak, I'm going to ask those questions. Okay.
Madam Mayor, I apologize.
Yes.
I just want to make
Could you
sure that the
borrow that?
motion and the second, we're talking about the agreement as amended that you received today. Thank you.
Councilmember Guinness, you concur with that? Yes. Okay. Councilmember Chavez, are you finished? Yeah, I'm good. Okay. Councilmember Reynolds.
Well, I'll go ahead and ask.
You are not in the queue. You have to request. No, that's, I don't know. I'm just going by what's on the screen here.
I'll go ahead and ask the question about the reprioritization. Can you describe what would be impacted by accelerating this study?
Sorry, that's what we were just whispering about here.
If you need a few minutes, we can come back.
I can tell you what our priorities are at the moment, and then we can go to maybe what can be delayed for a little bit. Certainly, our priorities are the master plan, looking at the master plan and how to update the master plan. Restoration of pools 5, 6, and 7 has to happen this year. That's a project that will be going on. And the wetlands, we continue to work in the wetlands to improve what's happening down there. I would say that those are the 3 top priorities. So from there, things like, as I mentioned to you, we do have an inventory for Canyon Park plan for next year. We might have to put that off until after the first of the year to begin that process. We are looking at developing more educational programs. That might take a little bit of a lull then, which we had planned to do in the winter anyway. It's slow time. And I think the other thing is looking at the signage and fencing program comprehensively. We might wait until after we get the master plan kind of resolved before we jump into that. Wetlands. I mentioned wetlands as a high priority.
Priorities, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah.
No, and adding no new projects.
So this based on your kind of quick assessment, recommendation or motion, I guess, to accelerate this particular study would not affect the ongoing restoration efforts at Fairview Park.
Correct.
Okay. Ongoing studies or restoration efforts
Correct.
at Fairview.
The wetlands and the vernal pool restorations have to continue.
Yeah. Okay.
Yes.
I had some requests for, I guess, the maker of the substitute motion. Would the maker of the substitute motion agree to add to the agreement and our general flying rules that city-issued permits are required and must be visible while using the fly field? And I asked for that to help with enforcement.
Can I make a correction? That is already a rule.
Yeah, it's not in the agreement, and so I'm asking that it be
No,
included in the agreement.
it's in the attachments that.
That it's visible?
Yes, that it be worn at all times.
Okay. Okay, I didn't see that in the agreement. Okay, I also didn't see this in agreement. So would the maker of the substitute motion add that flyers should avoid any interaction with wildlife, and that any flyers seen deliberately interacting with wildlife would immediately have their permit revoked?
Oh, yeah. Madam Mayor?
Hold on. City Attorney Barlow?
Yes. That would be something that we would address through the ordinance, because the ordinance covers the actual permits. This is just the agreement with the society itself. And I think we've already made clear in this agreement that it's subject to all the FAA rules, all of the environmental rules, and so on. What I would suggest is that if the stepped-up enforcement doesn't seem to address the concern, that we consider bringing back an amendment to the ordinance with respect to permitting, or perhaps a moratorium, as Councilmember Ganna suggested.
Okay, so we're not going to add that to the agreement.
So I've seen in the language in our flying rules references to, not flying over the lawn area, not impacting, I think, humans using the park. And I just wanted there to be some language specifically addressing interaction with wildlife. So is that something that we could add to the ordinance?
We don't have the ordinance before us right now. If we want to add that, we'd have to do that at a later time.
We could add it to the agreement, but it will only affect the members of the Harbor Soaring
Asking
Society.
about the ordinance.
Yes, we can't change it in the ordinance, but in terms of adding it to the agreement, we could do that. But that would only affect the Harbor Soaring Society members.
Her question was, can we add it to the ordinance when we?
We would have to bring that back for.
Thank you.
My original question was that, can we add it to the agreement?
And she said yes, but it would only apply to Harbor Soaring Society.
Okay.
Which probably aren't the culprits, is my guess.
Well, but stating in the rules.
Okay, so let's keep moving this along. Councilmember Guinness, do you accept that change? Yes, I do. Okay,
And then
Councilmember Chavez, do you accept?
Sorry.
Okay.
And then the other request is that if at any time, I guess this is not specifically for the agreement, but could we include in the motion, if at any time we have indication from the state or federal Fish and Wildlife that any activity is unacceptable and could threaten our ability to get grants, that we bring that for review.
Well, that would already happen.
The agreement back for review.
Yeah.
I agree.
Okay.
I'm sorry, can we get clarification, Mr. Martin?
Yes, Madam Mayor. Anytime that there was a specific recommendation that was incompatible or not in compliance with what our ordinance said, we would bring that to the council to avoid legal concerns.
I'm not understanding your request, Councilmember Reynolds. Well, I know, but the rest of us have to understand what we're voting on. So would you please explain, what is it you're trying to achieve with that?
So that right now, my understanding is right now that we do not have a specific recommendation from the state or federal Fish and Wildlife, and that if we do at any time during this study or before we're reviewing this again, do have a specific recommendation, that we would bring that for review immediately.
You mean specific recommendation as to the Soaring Society?
Related to the flying activity at Fairview Park, that we would review that immediately.
Does the second concur? Sure. I mean, it's going to happen anyway, so it's redundant, but go ahead. Anything else?
That's it.
Reynolds? Okay. Councilmember Marr.
Okay.
Sorry, so what you see on this screen is not what I have on this screen, sorry. I
No
don't
worries.
know why it's different. I didn't make up the system.
Sure. So I will not be supporting the motion, as much as it breaks my heart, and I do have a great love of all things aviation. I'm not convinced that this use of the park is the best fit. I would propose, although I'm probably not going to, at this point I can't get a substitute motion, but I would propose that we took some time, a 6-month moratorium, to go back and figure out if there is another location that's more appropriate in the city, somewhere else in Fairview Park that would make more sense, that is not 200 feet from a vernal pool. It just seems like a little bit of a contradiction to be talking about our restoration plan in the same breath as talking about continuing this agreement. And I think the voters overwhelmingly supported Measure AA and the goal of keeping the park as passive as possible. And so I'm as much as I love aviation, I'm just not convinced that oil and water can mix here. I guess we'll vote on the substitute motion. I'm happy to make an attempt at another one if that comes up. Thank you.
Mayor Pro Tem Stevens.
I have just a couple of quick questions. So, as I read the motion,
he's up next.
The substitute motion just pretty much wants to take the concept of the year, apart from the changes that were made in response to Councilmember Reynolds, and compress it into 6 months. 6 months, right? Okay, so in the staff recommendation, there's a reference to working with the Fairview Park Steering Committee and the Parks, Arts, and Community Services Commission, correct? Now, the Fairview Park Steering Committee meets monthly, correct? So
No, I'm sorry, correction, every other month.
every other month.
Correct.
So I know they had a meeting in
April.
In April. Wait, no,
And
they had a
June.
meeting in May.
Yes,
Or
I'm
June.
sorry.
June. I'm sorry,
It
June.
was June, it was April and June.
So their next meeting would be in August.
Correct.
Okay, and then their next meeting would be in October. Am I right?
Yes.
Are they dark in December?
No.
Okay, so they have 3 more meetings between now and the end of the year. Parks Commission, okay,
Monthly.
monthly. Now, typically, isn't it true that before the Parks Commission decides on something, it's vetted through the Fairview Park Steering Committee as it pertains to Fairview Park, okay?
Yes.
All right. So I just want to, as a practical matter, right, the reason I'm not going to support the substitute motion, and I do support the original motion, is as a practical matter, in addition to the issues that you've talked about. Now, when we talk about the wetlands, okay, that's something I'm deeply involved in, and that has to do with some residents on Swan Drive that have been complaining for years about issues involving mosquitoes, and I do believe that that's a priority over this issue. Do you agree?
I agree.
Okay, so we have to prioritize that issue that's been ongoing. We don't have sufficient meeting time of the Fairview Park Steering Committee. We don't have time to get it through the queue. I'm not hearing any exigency in support of the motion. So I don't think it's a good idea to compress this into 6 months as opposed to a year. So I will not be supporting the motion, and I would urge my colleagues on the council to support the original motion to let the staff have a year instead of 6 months.
Okay, Councilmember Mansour.
Thank you. First of all, thank you, Mayor Pro Tem, for that clarification. You made some very good points. The issue with the mosquitoes and what the residents on Swan Drive are facing is an extremely important issue, and I do not want that delayed at all. So I was open to supporting the 6-month turnaround time, you know, if staff was able to do that, but not if it's at the expense of the lower part of the park assessment with the mosquitoes. So that being said, I will stick to the original motion, and but I think all this discussion points to the need for Harbor Soaring Society to be very involved in this process. Let your voices be heard. I would encourage you immediately to find some type of volunteer policing, enforcement, where you have a member there as much as possible to speak up when you see people that are not following the rules. It's going to make everybody look bad if there's people going in different directions. The times I've gone by there, I see very few people with ID. I think they should be wearing their ID that shows they have a permit. If someone is there with ID and sees someone without it, call them out on it. You know, just like anything, police can't be everywhere all the time. We kind of have to police ourselves. I don't know if we can do some type of exclusive agreement with Harbor Soaring Society or not. I'm open to all options. I want it to be well-run, just like anything else in the city. I want it to be respectful of everyone, respectful of wildlife, a place where people can go and use it and enjoy it, but not abuse it. So I will be supporting the original motion.
Okay, Councilmember Guinness, and then we will call for the question on the
Okay.
substitute motion.
I believe there's a lot of confusion up here on the dais. First off, the motion says it's as written, it's the same as written in the staff report, except for it's 6 months, which says direct staff to conduct a comprehensive evaluation of the value of the partnership between HSS in the city and to assess the compatibility of all flying activity. As recommended by the Fairview Park Steering Committee. In other words, we're adhering to the recommendation of the Fairview Park Steering Committee. The motion does not require a lot of going back and forth with the Fairview Park Steering Committee and the Park Commission and so forth. And as a matter of fact, if we take a year to do the study and then do the going back and we have staff do the study over the course of a year and then have the Fairview Park interaction and then have the Park Committee interaction, we're looking at a year and a half. So there's some confusion on that. There's also seems to be confusion because Ms. D'Agostino already said that this would not displace the study of the mosquitoes, that the priorities would be restoration of the wetlands and restoration of the vernal pools 5, 6, and 7, working on the master plan, and the wetlands studies, which basically were the mosquito things. So it was my understanding that it wouldn't push back the mosquito issue. Is that correct?
Okay, I want to have Mr. Martin answer the first question and then Ms. D'Agostino answer the second question.
I only had one question.
You had two questions. The
No,
first
I had
question,
one clarification where I read the recommendation.
Councilmember Guinness, he actually disagrees with your interpretation. So please, Mr. Martin.
So, Madam Mayor, on page 3 of the staff report, under fiscal review, under the chart that's there, the statement, if the agreement is extended for a one-year period, the Parks and Community Services Department will issue permits that will become effective January 2020. It is projected that the Fairview Park Steering Committee, the Parks, Arts, and Community Services Commission, and the City Council will review and recommend action regarding this item again in June 2020. We've been going through this process with everything related to Fairview Park since Ms. D'Agosta came on board and since the Fairview Park Steering Committee was created, so that it goes through the public process and is as transparent as possible and lets us get as much public output as possible.
Okay,
and
thank
input.
you for that clarification. Ms. D'Agosta, can you?
But that doesn't affect doing the study in 6 months.
Yes, that's what, I think that's the confusion, is that the study contemplates taking the evaluative information back to the Parks Commission. That's what and to the Fairview Park Steering Committee. So it contemplates
That's the intent.
that.
Yes, that's correct.
Well, it would be my intent in the motion would be as worded in the actual recommendation, which is direct staff to conduct the comprehensive evaluation, except for within a one-year period, to conduct the comprehensive evaluation in a 6-month period. That was the intent of my motion, so that we were actually moving forward with it at the 6-month period as opposed to 12 months, it finally hits the public sphere.
I think there's some confusion. The plan was that throughout the year, it might be a poorly worded paragraph, I'll give you that. But the plan was that throughout the course of the year, there would be periods of time when it would go to Fairview Park Steering Committee and to the Parks Commission during that time period, correct?
Correct. And I do want to restate that what Councilmember Reynolds said earlier is that the steering committee has recently set up subcommittees. The intent is to be working with them on a monthly basis, not waiting for the every other month. So the process will continue on a monthly basis with the steering committee, with the Parks and Arts Commission, with the agencies that we have to work with. This is going to take some time.
Okay, and then as it relates to her second question, which is about prioritizing, can you address that issue?
Yes, what I had stated was that in quick thinking here, that the priorities, would be for the next year, the wetlands, the master plan work that we're doing, and the restoration of vernal pools 5, 6, and 7. Those would remain our priorities. And this study moving along with it.
Okay.
Meaning I can't add any new projects. There were a couple of things on the table that we might have to peel off for 6 months.
Councilmember Reynolds, and then I would like to call the question on the substitute motion. Councilmember Reynolds.
Yeah, my understanding of Councilmember Guinness's request to accelerate was to get findings ahead of the nesting season. So my understanding is the nesting season starts in February, March timeframe. So that's a little bit more than 6 months, but I don't know if you would want to modify your substitute motion to make that clear.
I would be happy to reword it to
They have to.
prior to the next one.
Yeah.
But we need a little time to evaluate too.
So would you modify your substitute motion to state that the study or a recommendation from the study be back to council by February 2020,
Or by the start of the nesting.
by the start of the nesting season.
Yeah.
Okay,
I think-
does the second concur?
I have a few questions I want to ask.
Okay,
So, I'm sorry, I just want to make sure I have it as,
hold on one second. Request your mic. Yeah.
I'm sure to have it as simple as possible. And I'm just asking a straight question. Would doing it in 6 months make it harder for you guys to get an accurate assessment?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay. With that being said, I will not support the substitute motion.
So you're withdrawing your second?
I will still have the vote, but I will vote no.
Well, no, but
Oh.
if you're going to vote no, you withdraw your second.
Now withdraw my second.
Okay. Okay, so can you clear the second? Okay. So Councilmember Guinness has a motion on the floor. The motion on the floor is to adopt the staff report as written, except for to change the time period to 6 months.
I'm sorry, I thought the second was withdrawn.
The second, I know, I said that's the motion on the floor. Is there a second?
That.
Okay, Councilmember Reynolds has second. Call for the question on the substitute motion. Councilmember Mansour.
Times the buttons, okay. The motion fails 2-5 with council members Mansour, Mar, Chavez, Foley, and Stevens voting no.
Okay, so the original motion is on the floor. Do we need to speak to that, Mayor Pro Tem Stevens, or can I call the question?
Wait, who was it? Just a second.
Call for the question on the original
wait.
motion.
Wait.
The original motion was the staff recommended action. Call for the question.
That motion carries 5-2 with council members Mar and Councilmember Guinness voting no.
Okay. That is the last item of business and the only item of business, new business tonight. And so, council members, if you'd like to speak, put your name in the queue. Councilmember Mar.
I just want to clarify for the record that I did not sign up for the dunk tank, and you can't make me Mayor Pro Tem.
Okay, Councilmember Chavez.
I'm not on yet.
Oh, sorry.
I will add that I was also voluntold, but I'll still do dunk tank. And I also want to take a quick time just to thank Ms. Letourneau for being an amazing city manager for my first 6 months here in City Council. It's been a pleasure to work with you, and I'm excited to work with you still, but just thank you for your hard work for us. I really appreciate it.
All right, enjoy the time off.
Thank you very much.
All right.
I still have work to do, don't worry.
Okay. Mayor Pro Tem Stevens.
Last thing I want to say is I want to congratulate Councilmember Reynolds for getting her master's in business administration.
Yes, congratulations. Yay.
We could use that expertise up here.
Thank you. Okay. Councilmember Guinness.
And also congratulating Councilmember Mansour on the latest addition to his family.
Yes.
And hoping he's able to get some sleep. And I'm also suggesting that Councilmember Mar start marketing her silent, invisible flyers out at Fairview Park, because I think we'd all go for them.
Okay. All right, meeting adjourned.